Thus did he speak, and Deiphobus was in two minds, whether to go back and fetch some other Trojan to help him, or to take up the challenge single-handed. In the end, he deemed it best to go and fetch Aeneas, whom he found standing in the rear, for he had long been aggrieved with Priam, because in spite his brave deeds, he did not give him his due share of honour. Deiphobus went up to him and said, Aeneas, prince among the Trojans, if you know any ties of kinship, help me now to defend the body of your sister's husband. Come with me to the rescue of Alcathous, who being husband to your sister, brought you up when you were a child in his house, and now Idomeneus has slain him. With these words he moved the heart of Aeneas, and he went in pursuit of Idomeneus, big with great deeds of valour. But Idomeneus was not to be thus daunted, as though he were a mere child. He held his ground as a wild boar at bay upon the mountains, who abides the coming of a great crowd of men in some lonely place. The bristles stand upright on his back, his eyes flash fire, and he whets his tusks in his eagerness to defend himself against hounds and men. Even so did famed Idomeneus hold his ground, and budge not at the coming of Aeneas. He cried aloud to his comrades looking towards Ascalaphus, Apharius, Deipyrus, Meriones, and Antilochus, all of them brave soldiers. Hither, my friends, he cried, and leave me not single-handed. I go in great fear by fleet Aeneas, who is coming against me, and is a redoubtable dispenser of death battle. Moreover, he is in the flower of youth, when a man's strength is greatest. If I was of the same age as he is, and in my present mind, either he or I should soon bear away the prize of victory. On this, all of them as one man stood near him, shield on shoulder. Aeneas on the other side called to his comrades, looking towards Deiphobus, Paris, and Agenor, who were leaders of the Trojans along with himself, and the people followed them as sheep follow the ram when they go down to drink after they have been feeding, and the heart of the shepherd is glad. Even so was the heart of Aeneas gladdened when he saw his people follow him. Then they fought furiously in close combat about the body of Alcathous, wielding their long spears, and the bronze armour about their bodies rang fearfully as they took aim at one another in the press of the fight, while the two heroes Aeneas and Idomeneus, peers of Mars, outside every one in their desire to hack at each other with sword and spear. Aeneas took aim first, but Idomeneus was on the lookout and avoided the spear, so that it sped from Aeneas's strong hand in vain, and fell quivering in the ground. Idomeneus, meanwhile, smote Eunomaus in the middle of his belly, and broke the plate of his corslet, whereon his bowels came gushing out, and he clutched the earth in the palms of his hands as he fell sprawling in the dust. Idomeneus drew his spear out of the body, but could not strip him of the rest of his armour for the rain of darts that were showered upon him. Moreover, his strength was now beginning to fail him, so that he could no longer charge, and could neither spring forward to recover his own weapon, nor swerve aside to avoid one that was aimed at him. Therefore, though he still defended himself in hand-to-hand fight, his heavy feet could not bear him swiftly out of the battle. Deiphobus aimed a spear at him as he was retreating slowly from the field, for his bitterness against him was as fierce as ever, but again he missed him, and hit Ascalaphus, the son of Mars. The spear went through his shoulder, and he clutched the earth in the palms of his hands as he fell sprawling in the dust. Grim Mars of awful voice did not yet know that his son had fallen, for he was sitting on the summits of Olympus, under the golden clouds, by command of Jove, where the other gods were also sitting, forbidden to take part in the battle. Meanwhile, men fought furiously about the body. Deiphobus tore the helmet from off his head, but Meriones sprang upon him and struck him on the arm with a spear, so that the visored helmet fell from his hand and came ringing down upon the ground. Thereon Meriones sprang upon him like a vulture, drew the spear from his shoulder, and fell back under cover of his men. Then Polites, own brother of Deiphobus, passed his arms around his waist and bore him away from the battle till he got to his horses, that were standing in the rear of the fight, with the chariot and their driver. These took him towards the city, groaning and in great pain, with the blood flowing from his arm. The others still fought on, and the battle cry rose to heaven without ceasing. Aeneas sprang on Aphareus, son of Calata, and struck him with a spear in his throat, which was turned towards him. His head fell on one side, his helmet and shield came down along with him, and death, life's foe, was shed around him. Antilochus spied his chance, flew forward towards Thun, and wounded him as he was turning round. He laid open the vein that runs all the way up the back to the neck. He cut this vein clean away throughout its whole course, and Thun fell in the dust face upwards, stretching out his hands imploringly towards his comrades. Antilochus sprang upon him, and stripped the armour from his shoulders, glaring round him fearfully as he did so. The Trojans came about him on every side, and struck his broad and gleaming shield, but could not wound his body, for Neptune stood guard over the son of Nestor, though the darts fell thickly round him. He was never clear of the foe, but was always in the thick of the fight. His spear was never idle. He poised and aimed it in every direction, so eager was he to hit someone from a distance, or to fight him hand to hand. As he was thus aiming among the crowd, he was seen by Adamas, son of Arceus, who rushed towards him and struck him with a spear in the middle of his shield, but Neptune made its point without effect, for he grudged him the life of Antilochus. One half, therefore, of the spear stuck fast like a charred stake in Antilochus's shield, while the other lay on the ground. Adamas then sought shelter under cover of his men, but Meriones followed after and hit him with a spear midway between the private parts and the navel, where a wound is particularly painful to wretched mortals. There did Meriones transfix him, and he writhed convulsively about the spear, as some bull whom mountain herdsmen have bound with ropes of withs and are taking away perforce. Even so did he move convulsively for a while, but not for very long, till Meriones came up and drew the spear out of his body, and his eyes were veiled in darkness. Helenus then struck Deipyrus with a great Thracian sword, hitting him on the temple in close combat, and tearing the helmet from his head. The helmet fell to the ground, and one of those who were fighting on the Achaean side took charge of it as it rolled at his feet, but the eyes of Deipyrus were closed in the darkness of death. On this Menelaus was grieved, and made menacingly towards Helenus, brandishing his spear. But Helenus drew his bow, and the two attacked one another at one and the same moment, the one with his spear, and the other with his bow and arrow. The son of Priam hit the breastplate of Menelaus's corslet, but the arrow glanced from off it, as black beans or pulse come pattering down onto a threshing floor from the broad winnowing shovel, blown by shrill winds and shaken by the shovel. Even so did the arrow glance off and recoil from the shield of Menelaus, who in his turn wounded the hand with which Helenus carried his bow. The spear went right through his hand and stuck in the bow itself, so that to his life he retreated under cover of his men, with his hand dragging by his side, for the spear weighed it down till Agenor drew it out and bound the hand carefully up in a woolen sling which his esquire had with him. Pisander then made straight at Menelaus, his evil destiny luring him on to his doom, for he was to fall in fight with you, O Menelaus. When the two were hard by one another, the spear of the son of Atreus turned aside, and he missed his aim, son of Atreus, drew his sword and sprang upon him. Pisander then seized the bronze battle-axe with its long and polished handle of olive wood that hung by his side under his shield, and the two made at one another. Pisander struck the peak of Menelaus's crested helmet just under the crest itself, and Menelaus hit Pisander as he was coming towards him, on the forehead, just at the rise of his nose. The bones cracked, and his two gore-bedrabbled eyes fell by his feet in the dust. He fell backwards to the ground, and Menelaus set his heel upon him, stripped him of his armour, and vaunted over him, saying, "Even thus shall you Trojans leave the ships of the Achaeans, proud and insatiate of battle though you be, nor shall you lack any of the disgrace and shame which you have heaped upon myself. Cowardly she-wolves that you are, you feared not the anger of dread Jove, avenger of violated hospitality, who will one day destroy your city. You stole my wedded wife, and wickedly carried off much treasure when you were her guest, and now you would fling fire upon our ships and kill our heroes. A day will come when, rage as you may, you shall be stayed. O Father Jove, you who they say art above all both gods and men in wisdom, and from whom all things that befall us do proceed, how can you thus favour the Trojans, men so proud and overweening that they are never tired of fighting? All things pall after a while, sleep, love, sweet song, and stately dance. Still these are things of which a man would surely have his fill, rather than of battle, whereas it is of battle that the Trojans are insatiate." So saying, Menelaus stripped the blood-stained armour from the body of Pisander, and handed it over to his men. Then he again ranged himself among those who were in the front of the fight. Harpalion, son of King Pylaemenes, then sprang upon him. He had come to fight at Troy along with his father, but he did not go home again. He struck the middle of Menelaus's shield with his spear, but could not pierce it, and to save his life, drew back under cover of his men, looking round him on every side, lest he should be wounded. But Meriones aimed a bronze-tipped arrow at him as he was leaving the field, and hit him on the right buttock. The arrow pierced the bone through and through, and penetrated the bladder. So he sat down where he was, and breathed his last in the arms of his comrades, stretched like a worm upon the ground, and watering the earth with the blood that flowed from his wound. The brave Paphlagonians tended him with all due care. They raised him into his chariot, and bore him sadly off to the city of Troy. His father went also with him, weeping bitterly, but there was no ransom that could bring his dead son to life again. Paris was deeply grieved by the death of Harpalion, who was his host when he went among the Paphlagonians. He aimed an arrow, therefore, in order to avenge him. Now there was a certain man named Euchenor, son of Polyidus the prophet, a brave man and wealthy, whose home was in Corinth. This Euchenor had set sail for Troy, well knowing that it would be the death of him, for his good old father Polyidus had often told him that he must either stay at home and die of a terrible disease, or go with the Achaeans and perish at the hands of the Trojans. He chose, therefore, to avoid incurring the heavy fine the Achaeans would have laid upon him, and at the same time to escape the pain and suffering of disease. Paris now smote him on the jaw under his ear, whereon the life went out of him, and he was enshrouded in the darkness of death. Thus then did they fight, as it were, a flaming fire. But Hector had not yet heard, and did not know that the Argives were making havoc of his men on the left wing of the battle, where the Achaeans ere long would have triumphed over them. So vigorously did Neptune cheer them on and help them. He therefore held on at the point where he had first forced his way through the gates and the wall, after breaking through the serried ranks of Danaan warriors. It was was here that the ships of Ajax and Protesilaus were drawn up by the seashore. Here the war was at its lowest, and the fight, both of man and horse, raged most fiercely. The Boeotians and the Ionians, with their long tunics, the Locrians, the men of Phthia, and the famous force of the Epeans, could hardly stay Hector as he rushed on towards the ships, nor could they drive him from them, for he was as a wall of fire. The chosen men of the Athenians were in the van, led by Menestheus, son of Peteos, with whom were also Phidias, Stichius, and stalwart Bias. Megas, son of Philius, Amphion, and Dracius commanded the Epeans, while Medon and staunch Pedates led the men of Phthia. Of these, Medon was bastard son to Oileus and brother of Ajax, but he lived in Phylus away from his own country, for he had killed the brother of his stepmother, Eriopis, the wife of Oileus. The other Pedates was the son of Iphiclus, son of Phylacus. These two stood in the van of the Parthians and defended the ships along with the Boeotians. Ajax, son of Oileus, never for a moment left the side of Ajax, son of Telamon, but as two swart oxen both strain their utmost at the plough which they are drawing in a fallow field, and the sweat steams upwards from about the roots of their horns. Nothing but the yoke divides them as they break up the ground till they reach the end of the field. Even so did the two Ajaxes stand shoulder to shoulder by one another. Many and brave comrades followed the son of Telamon to relieve him of his shield when he was overcome with sweat and toil, but the Locrians did not follow so close after the son of Oileus, for they could not hold their own in a hand-to-hand fight. They had no bronze helmets with plumes of horsehair, neither had they shields nor ashen spears, but they had come to Troy armed with bows, and with slings of twisted wool from which they showered their missiles to break the ranks of the Trojans. The others, therefore, with their heavy armour, bore the brunt of the fight with the Trojans and with Hector, while the Locrians shot from behind under their cover, and thus the Trojans began to lose heart, for the arrows threw them into confusion. The Trojans would now have been driven in sorry plight from the ships and tents back to windy Iliad, had not Polydamas presently said to Hector, "Hector, there is no persuading you to take advice. Because heaven has so richly endowed you with the arts of war, you think that you must therefore excel others in counsel, but you cannot thus claim preeminence in all things. Heaven has made one man an excellent soldier, of another it has made a dancer, or a singer, and player on the lyre, while yet in another Jove has implanted a wise understanding of which men reap fruit to the saving of many, and he himself knows more about it than anyone. Therefore I will say what I think will be best. The fight has hemmed you in as with a circle of fire, and even now that the Trojans are within the wall, some of them stand aloof in full armour, while others are fighting scattered and outnumbered near the ships. Draw back, therefore, and call your chieftains round you, that we may advise together whether to fall now upon the ships, in the hope that heaven may vouchsafe us victory, or to beat a retreat while we can yet safely do so. I greatly fear that the Achaeans will pay us their debt of yesterday in full, for there is one abiding at their ships who is never weary of battle, and who will not hold aloof much longer." Thus spoke Polydamas, and his words pleased Hector well. He sprang in full armour from his chariot and said, "Polydamas, gather the chieftains here. I will go yonder into the fight, but will return at once when I have given them their orders." He then sped onward, towering like a snowy mountain, and with a loud cry flew through the ranks of the Trojans and their allies. When they heard his voice, they all hastened to gather round Polydamas, the excellent son of Pantos, but Hector kept on among the foremost, looking everywhere, to find Deiphobus and Prince Helenus, Adamas, son of Usius, and Asius, son of Hyrtacus. Living indeed and scatheless, he could no longer find them, for the two last were lying by the sterns of the Achaean ships, slain by the Argives, while the others had been also stricken and wounded by them. But upon the left wing of the dread battle, he found Alexandrus, husband of lovely Helen, cheering his men and urging them on to fight. He went up to him and upbraided him. "Paris," said he, "evil-hearted Paris, fair to see but woman-mad and false of tongue, where are Deiphobus and King Helenus? Where are Adamas, son of Asius, and Asius, son of Hyrtacus? Where too is Othryoneus? Iliad is undone, and will now surely fall." Alexandrus answered, "Hector, why find fault when there is no one to find fault with? I should hold aloof from battle on any day rather than this. For my mother bore me with nothing of the coward about me. From the moment when you set our men fighting about the ships, we have been staying here, and doing battle with the Danaans. Our comrades, about whom you ask me, are dead. Deiphobus and King Helenus alone have left the field, wounded both of them in the hand, but the son of Saturn saved them alive. Now, therefore, lead on where you would have us go, and we will follow with right good will. You shall not find us fail you in so far as our strength holds out, but no man can do more than in him lies, no matter how willing he may be." With these words he satisfied his brother, and the two went towards the part of the battle where the fight was thickest, about Cebriones, brave Polydamas, Phalces, Orpheus, godlike Polyphetes, Palmis, Ascanius, and Maurice, son of Hippotion, who had come from fertile Ascania on the preceding day to relieve other troops. Then Jove urged them on to fight. They flew forth like the blasts of some fierce wind that strike earth in the van of a thunderstorm. They buffet the salt sea into an uproar. Many and mighty are the great waves that come crashing in one after the other upon the shore, with their arching heads all crested with foam. Even so did rank behind rank of Trojans arrayed in gleaming armour follow their leaders onward. The way was led by Hector, son of Priam, peer of murderous Mars, with his round shield before him, his shield of ox hides covered with plates of bronze, and his gleaming helmet upon his temples. He kept stepping forward, under cover of his shield in every direction, making trial of the ranks, to see if they would give way be him, but he could not daunt the courage of the Achaeans. Ajax was the first to stride out and challenge him. "Sir," he cried, "draw near. Why do you think thus vainly to dismay the Argives? We Achaeans are excellent soldiers, but the scourge of Jove has fallen heavily upon us. Your heart, forsooth, is set on destroying our ships, but we too have bands that can keep you at bay, and your own fair town shall be sooner taken and sacked by ourselves. The time is near when you shall pray Jove and all the gods in your flight, that your steeds may be swifter than hawks as they raise the dust on the plain and bear you back to your city." As he was thus speaking, a bird flew by upon his right hand, and the host of the Achaeans shouted, for they took heart at the omen. But Hector answered, "Ajax, braggart, and false of tongue, would that I were as sure of being son for evermore to aegis-bearing Jove, with Queen Juno for my mother, and of being held in like honour with Minerva and Apollo, as I am that this day is big with the destruction of the Achaeans, and you shall fall among them if you dare abide my spear. It shall rend your fair body and bid you glut our hounds and birds of prey with your fat and your flesh, as you fall by the ships of the Achaeans." With these words he led the way, and the others followed after with a cry that rent the air, while the host shouted behind them. The Argives on their part raised a shout likewise, nor did they forget their prowess, but stood firm against the onslaught of the Trojan chieftains. and the cry from both the hosts rose up to heaven and to the brightness of Jove's presence. Book birthdays. Nestor was sitting over his wine, but the cry of battle did not escape him, and he said to the son of Aesculapius, "What, noble Machaon, is the meaning of all this? The shouts of men fighting by our ships grow stronger and stronger. Stay here, therefore, and sit over your wine, while fair Hecamede heats you a bath and washes the clotted blood from off you. I will go at once to the lookout station and see what it is all about." As he spoke, he took up the shield of his son Thrasymedes, that was lying in his tent, all gleaming with bronze, for Thrasymedes had taken his father's shield. He grasped his redoubtable bronze-shod spear, and as soon as he was outside saw the disastrous rout of the Achaeans, who, now that their wall was overthrown, were flying pell-mell before the Trojans. As when there is a heavy swell upon the sea, but the waves are dumb, they keep their eyes on the watch for the quarter whence the fierce winds may spring upon them, but they stay where they are, and set neither this way nor that, till some particular wind sweeps down from heaven to determine them. Even so did the old man ponder whether to make for the crowd of Danaans, or go in search of Agamemnon. In the end he deemed it best to go to the son of Atreus, but meanwhile the hosts were fighting and killing one another, and the hard bronze rattled on their bodies as they thrust at one another with their swords and spears. The wounded kings, the son of Tydeus, Ulysses and Agamemnon, son of Atreus, fell in Nestor as they were coming up from their ships, for theirs were drawn up some way from where the fighting was going on, being on the shore itself, inasmuch as they had been beached first, while the wall had been built behind the hindermost. The stretch of the shore, wide though it was, did not afford room for all the ships, and the host was cramped for space. Therefore they had placed the ships in rows one behind the other, and had filled the whole opening of the bay between the 2 points that formed it. The kings, leaning on their spears, were coming out to survey the fight, being in great anxiety, and when old Nestor met them, they were filled with dismay. Then King Agamemnon said to him, "Nestor, son of Neleus, honour to the Achaean name, why have you left the battle to come hither? I fear that what dread Hector said will come true, when he vaunted among the Trojans, saying that he would not return to Iliad till he had fired our ships and killed us. This is what he said, and now it is all coming true. Alas, others of the Achaeans, like Achilles, are in anger with me that they refuse to fight by the sterns of our ships." Then Nestor, knight of Gerene, answered, "It is indeed as you say, it is all coming true at this moment, and even Jove, who thunders from on high, cannot prevent it. Fallen is the wall on which we relied as an impregnable bulwark both for us and our fleet. The Trojans are fighting stubbornly and without ceasing at the ships. Look where you may, you cannot see from what quarter the rout of the Achaeans is coming. They are being killed in a confused mass, and the battle cry ascends to heaven. Let us think, if counsel can be of any use, what we had better do, but I do not advise our going into battle ourselves, for a man cannot fight when he is wounded." And King Agamemnon answered, "Nestor, if the Trojans are indeed fighting at the rear of our ships, and neither the wall nor the trench has served us, over which the Danaans toiled so hard, and which they deemed would be an impregnable bulwark both for us and our fleet, I see it must be the will of Jove that the Achaeans should perish ingloriously here, far from Argos. I knew when Jove was willing to defend us, and I know now that he is raising the Trojans to like honour with the gods, while us, on the other hand, he has bound hand and foot. Now, therefore, let us all do as I say, let us bring down the ships that are on the beach and draw them into the water. Let us make them fast to their mooring stones, a little way out against the fall of night. If even by night the Trojans will desist from fighting, we may then draw down the rest of the fleet. There is nothing wrong in flying ruin even by night. It is better for a man that he should fly and be saved than be caught and killed. Ulysses looked fiercely at him and said, "Son of Atreus, what are you talking about? Wretch, you should have commanded some other and baser army, and not been ruler over us, to whom Jove has allotted a life of hard fighting from youth to old age, till we every one of us perish. Is it thus that you would quit the city of Troy to win which we have suffered so much hardship? Hold your peace, lest some other of the Achaeans hear you say, what no man who knows how to give good counsel, no king over so great a host as that of the Argives, should ever have let fall from his lips. I despise your judgment utterly for what you have been saying. Would you then have us draw down our ships into the water while the battle is raging, and thus play further into the hands of the conquering Trojans? It would be ruin. The Achaeans will not go on fighting when they see the ships being drawn into the water, but will cease attacking and keep turning their eyes towards them. Your counsel, therefore, Sir Captain, would be our destruction." Agamemnon answered, "Ulysses, your rebuke has stung me to the heart. I am not, however, ordering the Achaeans to draw their ships into the sea, whether they will or no. Someone, it may be, old or young, can offer us better counsel, which I shall rejoice to hear." Then said Diomed, "Such an one is at hand. He is not far to seek, if you will listen to me, and not resent my speaking. Though I am younger than any of you, I am by lineage son to a noble sire, Tydeus, who lies buried at Thebes. For Portheus had 3 noble sons, 2 of whom, Agrius and Melas, abode in Pleuron and rocky Calydon. The third was the knight Oeneus, my father's father, and he was the most valiant of them all. Oeneus remained in his own country, but my father, as Jove and the other gods ordained it, migrated to Argos. He married into the family of Adrastus, and his house was one of great abundance, for he had large estates of rich corn-growing land, with much orchard ground as well, and he had many sheep. Moreover, he excelled all the Argives in the use of the spear. You must yourselves have heard whether these things are true or no. Therefore, when I say, well, despise not my words as though I were a coward or of ignoble birth. I say then, let us go to the fight, as we needs must, wounded though we be. When there, we may keep out of the battle, and beyond the range of the spears, lest we get fresh wounds, in addition to what we have already, but we can spur on others, who have been indulging their spleen and holding aloof from battle hitherto." Thus did he speak, whereon they did even as he had said, and set out, King Agamemnon leading the way. Meanwhile Neptune had kept no blind lookout, and came up to them in the semblance of an old man. He took Agamemnon's right hand in his own, and said, "Son of Atreus, I take it Achilles is glad now that he sees the Achaeans routed and slain, for he is utterly without remorse. May he come to a bad end, and heaven confound him. As for yourself, the blessed gods are not yet so bitterly angry with you, but that the princes and counsellors of the Trojans shall again raise the dust upon the plain, and you shall see them flying from the ships and tents towards their city." With this he raised a mighty cry of battle, and sped forward to the plain. The voice that came from his deep chest was as that of 9,000 or 10,000 men when they are shouting in the thick of a fight, and it put fresh courage into the hearts of the Achaeans to wage war and do battle without ceasing. Juno of the golden throne looked down as she stood upon a peak of Olympus, and her heart was gladdened at the sight of him who was at once Then she turned her eyes to Jove as he sat on the topmost crests of many-fountained Ida, and loathed him. She set herself to think how she might hoodwink him, and in the end she deemed that it would be best for her to go to Ida and array herself in rich attire, in the hope that Jove might become enamoured of her, and wish to embrace her. While he was thus engaged, a sweet and careless sleep might be made to steal over his eyes and senses. She went therefore to the room which her son Vulcan had made her, and the doors of which he had cunningly fastened, by means of a secret key, so that no other god could open them. Here she entered and closed the doors behind her. She cleansed all the dirt from her fair body with ambrosia. Then she anointed herself with olive oil, ambrosial, very soft, and scented specially for herself, if it was so much as shaken in the bronze-floored house of Jove. The scent pervaded the universe of heaven and earth. With this she anointed her delicate skin, and then she plaited the fair ambrosial locks that flowed in a stream of golden tresses from her immortal head. She put on the wondrous robe which Minerva had worked for her with consummate art, and had embroidered with manifold devices. She fastened it about her bosom with golden clasps, and she girded herself with a girdle that had 100 tassels. Then she fastened her earrings, 3 brilliant pendants that glistened most beautifully, through the pierced lobes of her ears, and threw a lovely new veil over her head. She bound her sandals onto her feet, and when she had arrayed herself perfectly to her satisfaction, she left her room and called Venus to come aside and speak to her. "My dear child," said she, "will you do what I am going to ask of you, or will refuse me because you are angry at my being on the Danaan side, while you are on the Trojan?" Jove's daughter Venus answered, "Juno, august queen of goddesses, daughter of mighty Saturn, say what you want, and I will do it for at once, if I can, and if it can be done at all." Then Juno told her a lying tale and said, "I want you to endow me with some of those fascinating charms, the spells of which bring all things mortal and immortal to your feet. I am going to the world's end to visit Oceanus, from whom all we gods proceed, and Mother Tethys. They received me in their house, took care of me, and brought me up, having taken me over from Rhea, when Jove imprisoned great Saturn in the depths that are under earth and sea. I must go and see them, that I may make peace between them. They have been quarrelling, and are so angry that they have not slept with one another this long while. If I can bring them round and restore them to one another's embraces, they will be grateful to me and love me for ever afterwards." Thereon laughter-loving Venus said, "I cannot and must not refuse you, for you sleep in the arms of Jove, who is our king." As she spoke, she loosed from her bosom the curiously embroidered girdle into which all her charms had been wrought, love, desire, and that sweet flattery which steals the judgment even of the most prudent. She gave the girdle to Juno and said, "Take this girdle wherein all my charms reside, and lay it in your bosom. If you will wear it, I promise you that your errand, be it what it may, will not be bootless." When she heard this, Juno smiled, and still smiling, she laid the girdle in her bosom. Venus now went back into the house of Jove, while Juno darted down from the summits of Olympus. She passed over Pieria and fair Emathia, and went on till she came to the snowy ranges of the Thracian horsemen, over whose topmost crests she sped without ever setting foot to ground. When she came to Athos, she went on over the waves of the sea, till she reached Lemnos, the city of noble Thoas. There she met Sleep, own brother to Death, and caught him by the hand, saying, "Sleep, you who lorded alike over mortals and immortals, if you ever did me a service in times past, do one for me now, and I shall be grateful to you ever after. Close Jove's keen eyes for me in slumber, while I hold him clasped in my embrace, I will give you a beautiful golden seat that can never fall to pieces. My club-footed son Vulcan shall make it for you, and he shall give it a footstool for you to rest your fair feet upon when you are at table." Then Sleep answered, "Juno, great queen of goddesses, daughter of mighty Saturn, I would lull any other of the gods to sleep without compunction, not even excepting the waters of Oceanus, from whom all of them proceed. But I dare not go near Jove, nor send him to sleep, unless he bids me. I have had one lesson already through doing what you asked me, on the day when Jove's mighty son Hercules set sail from Iliad, after having sacked the city of the Trojans. At your bidding I suffused my sweet self over the mind of aegis-bearing Jove, and laid him to rest. Meanwhile you hatched a plot against Hercules, and set the blasts of the angry winds beating upon the sea, till you took him to the goodly city of Cos, away from all his friends. Jove was furious when he awoke, and began hurling the gods about all over the house. He was looking more particularly for myself, and would have flung me down through space into the sea, where I should never have been heard of any more, had not Night, who cows both men and gods, protected me. I fled to her, and Jove left off looking for me, in spite of his being so angry, for he did not dare do anything to displease Night. And now you are again asking me to do something on which I cannot venture." And Juno said, "Sleep, why do you take such notions as those into your head? Do you think Jove will be as anxious to help the Trojans as he was about his own son? Come, I will marry you to one of the youngest of the Graces, and she shall be your own, Pasithea, whom you have always wanted to marry." Sleep was pleased when he heard this, and answered, "Then swear it to me by the dread waters of the river Styx. Lay one hand on the bounteous earth, and the other on the sheen of the sea, so that all the gods who dwell down below with Saturn may be our witnesses, and see that you really do give me one of the youngest of the Graces, Pasithea, whom I have always wanted to marry." Juno did as he had said. She swore, and invoked all the gods of the nether world, who are called Titans, to witness. When she had completed her oath, the two enshrouded themselves in a thick mist, and sped lightly forward, leaving Lemnos and Imbrus behind them. Presently they reached many-fountained Ida, mother of wild beasts, and Lectum, where they left the sea to go on by land, and the tops of the trees of the forest soughed under the going of their feet. Here Sleep halted, and ere Jove caught sight of him, he climbed a lofty pine tree, the tallest that reared its head towards heaven on all Ida. He hid himself behind the branches, and sat there in the semblance of the sweet-singing bird that haunts the mountains, and is called Chalcis by the gods, but men call it Simindis. Juno then went to Gargarus, the topmost peak of Ida, and Jove, driver of the clouds, set eyes upon her. As soon as he did so, he became inflamed with the same passionate desire for her that he had felt when they had first enjoyed each other's embraces and slept with one another without their dear parents knowing anything about it. He went up to her and said, "What do you want that you have come hither from Olympus, and that too with neither chariot nor horses to convey you?" Then Juno told him a lying tale, and said, "I am going to the world's end, to visit Oceanus, from whom all we gods proceed, and mother Tethys. They received me into their house, took care of me, and brought me up. I must go and see them that I may make peace between them. They have been quarrelling, and are so angry that they have not slept with one another this long time. The horses that will take me over land and sea are stationed on the lowermost spurs of many-fountained Ida, and I have come here from Olympus on purpose to consult you. I was afraid you might be angry with me later on, if I went to the house of Oceanus without letting you know." And Jove said, "Juno, you can choose some other time for paying your visit to Oceanus. For the present, let us devote ourselves to love and to the enjoyment of one another. Never yet have I been so overpowered by passion, neither for goddess nor mortal woman, as I am at this moment for yourself. Not even when I was in love with the wife of Ixion, who bore me Pirithous, peer of gods in council, nor yet with Danae, the daintily ankled daughter of Acrisius, who bore me the famed hero Perseus. Then there was the daughter of Phoenix, who bore me Minos and Rhadamanthus. There was Semele and Alcmena in Thebes, by whom I begot my lion-hearted son Hercules, while Semele became mother to Bacchus, the comforter of mankind. There was Queen Ceres again, and lovely Leto and yourself, but with none of these was I ever so much enamoured as I now am with you. Juno again answered him with a lying tale. Most dread son of Saturn, she exclaimed, what are you talking about? Would you have us enjoy one another here on the top of Mount Ida, where everything can be seen? What if one of the ever-living gods should see us sleeping together and tell the others? It would be such a scandal that when I had risen from your embraces, I could never show myself inside your house again. But if you are so minded, there is a room which your son Vulcan has made me, and he has given it good strong doors. If you would so have it, let us go thither and lie down. And Jove answered, Juno, you need not be afraid that either god or man will see you, for I will enshroud both of us in such a dense golden cloud that the very sun, for all his bright piercing beams, shall not see through it. With this, the son of Saturn caught his wife in his embrace, whereon the earth sprouted them a cushion of young grass, with dew-bespangled lotus, crocus, and hyacinth, so soft and thick that it raised them well above the ground. Here they laid themselves down, and overhead they were covered by a fair cloud of gold, from which there fell glittering dewdrops. Thus then did the sire of all things repose peacefully on the crest of Ida, overcome at once by sleep and love, and he held his spouse in his arms. Meanwhile, Sleep made off to the ships of the Achaeans to tell earth-encircling Neptune, lord of the earthquake. When he had found him, he said, Now, Neptune, you can help the Danaans with a will, and give them victory, though it be only for a short time, while Jove is still sleeping. I have sent him into a sweet slumber, and Juno has beguiled him into going to bed with her. Sleep now departed, and went his ways to and fro among mankind, leaving Neptune more eager than ever to help the Danaans. He darted forward among the first ranks, and shouted, saying, Argives, shall we let Hector son of Priam have the triumph of taking our ships, and covering himself with glory? This is what he says that he shall now do, seeing that Achilles is still in dudgeon at his ship. We shall get on very well without him, if we keep each other in heart, and stand by one another. Now, therefore, let us all do as I say. Let us each take the best and largest shield we can lay hold of, put on our helmets, and sally forth with our longest spears in our hands. We'll lead you on, and Hector, son of Priam, rage as he may, will not dare to hold out against us. If any good staunch soldier has only a small shield, let him hand it over to a worse man and take a larger one for himself. Thus did he speak, and they did even as he had said. The son of Tydeus, Ulysses, and Agamemnon, wounded though they were, set the others in array, and went about everywhere, effecting the exchanges of armour. The most valiant took the best armour, and gave the worst to the worse man. When they had donned their bronze armour, they marched on with Neptune at their head. In his strong hand he grasped his terrible sword, keen of edge and flashing like lightning. Woe to him who comes across it in the day of battle. All men quake for fear and keep away from it. Hector on the other side set the Trojans in array. Thereon Neptune and Hector waged fierce war on one another, Hector on the Trojan and Neptune on the Argive side. Mighty was the uproar as the two forces met. The sea came rolling in towards the ships and tents of the Achaeans, but waves do not thunder on the shore more loudly when driven before the blast of Boreas, nor do the flames of a forest fire roar more fiercely when it is well alight upon the mountains, nor does the wind bellow with ruder music as it tears on through the tops of when it is blowing its hardest, than the terrible shout which the Trojans and Achaeans raised as they sprang upon one another. Hector first aimed his spear at Ajax, who was turned full towards him, nor did he miss his aim. The spear struck him where two bands passed over his chest, the band of his shield and that of his silver-studded sword, and these protected his body. Hector was angry that his spear should have been hurled in vain, and withdrew under cover of his men. As he was thus retreating, Ajax, son of Telamon, struck him with a stone, of which there were many lying about under the men's feet as they fought, brought there to give support to the ship's sides as they lay on the shore. Ajax caught up one of them, and struck Hector above the rim of his shield, close to his neck. The blow made him spin round like a top, and reel in all directions, as an oak falls headlong when uprooted by the lightning flash of Father Jove, and there is a terrible smell of brimstone. No man can help being dismayed if he is standing near it, for a thunderbolt is a very awful thing. Even so did Hector fall to earth, and bite the dust. His spear fell from his hand, but his shield and helmet were made fast about his body, and his bronze armour rang about him. The sons of the Achaeans came running with a loud cry towards him, hoping to drag him away, and they showered their darts on the Trojans, but none of them could wound him before he was surrounded and covered by the princes Polydamas, Aeneas, Agenor, Sarpedon, captain of the Lycians, and noble Glaucus. Of the others too there was not one who was unmindful of him, and they held their round shields over him to cover him. His comrades then lifted him off the ground, and bore him away from the battle to the place where his horses stood, waiting for him at the rear of the fight, with their driver and the chariot. These then took him towards the city, groaning and in great pain. When they reached the ford of the airstream of Xanthus, begotten of immortal Jove, they took him from off his chariot, and laid him down on the ground. They poured water over him, and as they did so, he breathed again, and opened his eyes. Then, kneeling on his knees, he vomited blood, but soon fell back onto the ground, and his eyes were again closed in darkness, for he was still stirred by the blow. When the Argives saw Hector leaving the field, they took heart, and set upon the Trojans yet more furiously. Ajax, fleet son of Oileus, began by springing on Satnius, son of Enops, and wounding him with his spear. A fair naiad nymph had borne him to Enops as he was herding cattle by the banks of the river Satnioes. The son of Oileus came up to him and struck him in the flank, so that he fell, and a fierce fight between Trojans and Danaans raged round his body. Polydamas, son of Panthos, drew near to avenge him, and wounded Prothinor's son of Areilicus on the right shoulder. The terrible spear went right through his shoulder, and he clutched the earth as he fell in the dust. Polydamas vaunted loudly over him, saying, "Again I take it that the spear has not sped in vain from the strong hand of the son of Panthos. An Argive has caught it in his body, and it will serve him for a staff as he goes down into the house of Hades." The Argives were maddened by this boasting. Ajax, son of Telamon, was more angry than any, for the man had fallen close by him. So he aimed at Polydamas as he was retreating, but Polydamas saved himself by swerving aside, and the spear struck Archelicus, son of Antenor, for heaven counselled his destruction. It struck him where the head springs from the neck at the top joint of the spine, and severed both the tendons at the back of the head. His head, mouth, and nostrils reached the ground long before his legs and knees could do so, and Ajax shouted to Polydamas, saying, "Think, Polydamas, and tell me truly whether this man is not as well worth killing as Prothenor was. He seems rich, and of rich family, a brother it may be, or son of the knight Antenor, for he is very like him." But he knew well who it was, and the Trojans were greatly angered. Acamas then bestrode his brother's body, and wounded Promachus the Boeotian with his spear, for he was trying to drag his brother's body away. Acamas vaunted loudly over him, saying, "Argive archers, braggarts that you are, toil and suffering shall not be for us only, but some of you too shall fall here, as well as ourselves. See how Promachus now sleeps, vanquished by my spear. Payment for my brother's blood has not long delayed. A man therefore may well be thankful if he leaves a kinsman in his house behind him to avenge his fall." His taunts infuriated the Argives, and Peneleos was more enraged than any of them. He sprang towards Acamas, but Acamas did not stand his ground, and he killed Ilioneus, son of the rich blockmaster Phorbas, whom Mercury had favoured and endowed with greater wealth than any other of the Trojans. Ilioneus was his only son, and Peneleos now wounded him in the eye under his eyebrows, tearing the eyeball from its socket. The spear went right through the eye into the nape of the neck, and he fell, stretching out both hands before him. Peneleos then drew his sword and smote him on the neck, so that both head and helmet came tumbling down to the ground, with the spear still sticking in the eye. He then held up the head, as though it had been a poppy head, and showed it to the Trojans, vaunting over them as he did so. "Trojans," he cried, "bid the father and mother of noble Ilioneus make moan for him in their house, for the wife also of Promachus, son of Alegenor, will never be gladdened by the coming of her dear husband, when we Argives return with our ships from Troy." As he spoke, fear fell upon them, and every man looked round about to see whither he might fly for safety. "Tell me now, O Muses that dwell on Olympus, who was the first of the Argives to bear away blood-stained spoils, after Neptune, lord of the earthquake, had turned the fortune of war. Ajax, son of Telamon, was first to wound Hirtius, son of Gertius, captain of the staunch Mysians. Antilochus killed Phalces and Murmurus, while Meriones slew Morris and Hippotion. Teucer also killed Prothune and Periphetes. The son of Atreus then wounded Hyperenor shepherd of his people in the flank, and the bronze point made his entrails gush out, as it tore in among them. On this his life came hurrying out of him, at the place where he had been wounded, and his eyes were closed in darkness. Ajax, son of Oileus, killed more than any other, for there was no man so fleet as he to pursue flying foes when Jove had spread panic among them. Book. But when their flight had taken them past the trench and the set stakes, and many had fallen by the hands of the Danaans, the Trojans made a halt on reaching their chariots, routed and pale with fear. Jove now woke on the crests of Ida, where he was lying with golden-throned Juno by his side, and starting to his feet he saw the Trojans and Achaeans, the one thrown into confusion, and the others driving them pell-mell before them, with King Neptune in their midst. He saw Hector lying on the ground, with his comrades gathered round him, gasping for breath, wandering in mind and vomiting blood, for it was not the feeblest of the Achaeans who struck him. The sire of gods and men had pity on him, and looked fiercely on Juno. "I see Juno," said he, You mischief-making trickster, that your cunning has stayed Hector from fighting, and has caused the rout of his host. I am in half a mind to thrash you, in which case you will be the first to reap the fruits of your scurvy knavery. Do you not remember how once upon a time I had you hanged? I fastened 2 anvils onto your feet, and bound your hands in a chain of gold, which none might break, and you hung in mid-air among the clouds. All the gods in Olympus were in a fury, but they could not reach you to set you free. When I caught any one of them, I gripped him, and hurled him from the heavenly threshold, till he came fainting down to earth. Yet even this did not relieve my mind from the incessant anxiety which I felt about noble Hercules, whom you and Boreas had spitefully conveyed beyond the seas to Kos after suborning the tempests. But I rescued him, and notwithstanding all his mighty labours, I brought him back again to Argos. I would remind you of this, that you may learn to leave off being so deceitful, and discover how much you are likely to gain by the embraces out of which you have come here to trick me. Juno trembled as he spoke, and said, May heaven above and earth below be my witnesses, with the waters of the river Styx, and this is the most solemn oath that a blessed god can take. Nay, I swear also by your own almighty head, and by our bridal bed, things over which I can never possibly perjure myself, that Neptune is not punishing Hector and the Trojans, and helping the Achaeans through any doing of mine. It is all of his own mere motion, because he was sorry to see the Achaeans hard pressed at their ships. If I were advising him, I should tell him to do as you bid him. The sire of gods and men smiled, and answered, If you, Juno, were always to support me when we sit in council of the gods, Neptune, like it or no, would soon come round to your and my way of thinking. If then you are speaking the truth, and mean what you say, go among the rank and file of the gods, and tell Iris and Apollo, lord of the bow, that I want them. Iris, that she may go to the Achaean host, and tell Neptune to leave off fighting, and go home, and Apollo, that he may send Hector again into battle, and give him fresh strength. He will thus forget his present sufferings, and drive the Achaeans back in confusion, till they fall among the ships of Achilles, son of Peleus. Achilles will then send his comrade Patroclus into battle, and Hector will kill him in front of Iliad after he has slain many warriors, and among them my own noble son Sarpedon. Achilles will kill Hector to avenge Patroclus, and from that time I will bring it about that the Achaeans shall persistently drive the Trojans back till they fulfill the counsels of Minerva and take Iliad. But I will not stay my anger, nor permit any god to help the Danaan, till I have accomplished the desire of the son of Peleus, according to the promise I made, by bowing my head on the day when Thetis touched my knees and besought me to give him honour. Juno heeded his words, and went from the heights of Ida to great Olympus. Swift as the thought of one whose fancy carries him over vast continents, and he says to himself, Now I will be here or there, and he would have all manner of things. Even so swiftly did Juno wing her way, till she came to high Olympus, and went in among the gods who were gathered in the house of Jove. When they saw her, they all of them came up to her, and held out their cups to her by way of greeting. She let the others be, but took the cup offered her by lovely Themis, who was first to come running up to her. Juno, said she, why are you here, and you seem troubled? Has your husband, the son of Saturn, been frightening you? And Juno answered, Themis, do not ask me about it. You know what a proud and cruel disposition my husband has. Lead the gods to table, where you and all the immortals can hear the wicked designs which he has avowed. Many a one, mortal and immortal, will be angered by them, however peaceably he may be feasting now. On this Juno sat down, and the gods were troubled throughout the house of Jove. Laughter sat on her lips, but her brow was furrowed with care, and she spoke up in a rage. "Fools that we are," she cried, "to be thus madly angry with Jove. We keep on wanting to go up to him and stay him by force or by persuasion, but he sits aloof and cares for nobody, for he knows that he is much stronger than any other of the immortals. Make the best, therefore, of whatever ills he may choose to send each one of you. Mars, I take it, has had a taste of them already, for his son Ascalaphus has fallen in battle, the man whom of all others he loved most dearly, and whose father he owns himself to be." When he heard this, Mars smote his 2 sturdy thighs with the flat of his hands, and said in anger, "Do not blame me, you gods that dwell in heaven, if I go to the ships of the Achaeans and avenge the death of my son, even though it end in my being struck by Jove's lightning and lying in blood and dust among the corpses." As he spoke, he gave orders to yoke his horses Panic and Rout, while he put on his armour. On this, Jove would have been roused to still more fierce and implacable enmity against the other immortals, had not Minerva, alarmed for the safety of the gods, sprung from her seat and hurried outside. She tore the helmet from his head and the shield from his shoulders, and she took the bronze spear from his strong hand and set it on one side. Then she said to Mars, "Madman, you are undone. You have ears that hear not, or you have lost all judgment and understanding. Have you not heard what Juno has said on coming straight from the presence of Olympian Jove? Do you wish to go through all kinds of suffering before you are brought back sick and sorry to Olympus, after having caused infinite mischief to all us others? Jove would instantly leave the Trojans and Achaeans to themselves. He would come to Olympus to punish us, and would grip us up one after another, guilty or not guilty. Therefore, lay aside your anger for the death of your son. Better men than he have either been killed already, or will fall hereafter, and one cannot protect everyone's whole family." With these words, she took Mars back to his seat. Meanwhile, Juno called Apollo outside, with Iris the messenger of the gods. "Jove," she said to them, "desires you to go to him at once, on Mount Ida. When you have seen him, you are to do as he may then bid you." Thereon Juno left them and resumed her seat inside, while Iris and Apollo made all haste on their way. When they reached many-fountained Ida, mother of wild beasts, they found Jove seated on topmost Gargarus, with a fragrant cloud encircling his head, as with a diadem. They stood before his presence, and he was pleased with them for having been so quick in obeying the orders his wife had given them. He spoke to Iris first. "Go," said he, "fleet Iris, tell King Neptune what I now bid you, and tell him true. Bid him leave off fighting, and either join the company of the gods, or go down into the sea. If he takes no heed and disobeys me, let him consider well whether he is strong enough to hold his own against me if I attack him. I am older and much stronger than he is, yet he is not afraid to set himself up as on a level with myself, of whom all the other gods stand in awe." Iris, fleet as the wind, obeyed him, and as the cold hail or snowflakes that fly from out the clouds before the blast of Boreas, even so did she wing her way till she came close up to the great shaker of the earth. Then she said, "I have come, O dark-haired king that holds the world in his embrace, to bring you a message from Jove. He bids you leave off fighting, and either join the company of the gods, or go down into the sea. If, however, you take no heed and disobey him, he says he will come down here and fight you. He would have you keep out of his reach, for he is older and much stronger than you are, and yet you are not afraid to set yourself up as on a level with himself, of whom all the other gods stand in awe. Neptune was very angry and said, "Great heavens, strong as Jove may be, he has said more than he can do if he has threatened violence against me, who am of like honour with himself. We were 3 brothers whom Rhea bore to Saturn Jove, myself, and Hades, who rules the world below. Heaven and earth were divided into 3 parts, and each of us was to have an equal share. When we cast lots, it fell to me to have my dwelling in the sea for evermore. Hades took the darkness of the realms under the earth, while air and sky and clouds were the portion that fell to Jove. But earth and great Olympus are the common property of all. Therefore I will not walk as Jove would have me. For all his strength, let him keep to his own 3rd share and be contented without threatening to lay hands upon me, as though I were nobody. Let him keep his bragging talk for his own sons and daughters, who must perforce obey him." Iris, fleet as the wind, then answered, "Am I really Neptune to take this daring and unyielding message to Jove, or will you reconsider your answer? Sensible people are open to argument, and you know that the Erinyes always range themselves on the side of the older person." Neptune answered, "Goddess Iris, your words have been spoken in season. It is well when a messenger shows so much discretion. Nevertheless, it cuts me to the very heart that anyone should rebuke so angrily another who is his own peer, and of like empire with himself. Now, however, I will give way in spite of my displeasure. Furthermore, let me tell you, and I mean what I say, if contrary to the desire of myself, Minerva, driver of the spoil, Juno, Mercury, and King Vulcan, Jove spares his steep Iliad, and will not let the Achaeans have the great triumph of sacking it, let him understand that he will incur our implacable resentment." Neptune now left the field to go down under the sea, and sorely did the Achaeans miss him. Then Jove said to Apollo, "Go, dear Phoebus, to Hector, for Neptune, who holds the earth in his embrace, has now gone down under the sea to avoid the severity of my displeasure. Had he not done so, those gods who are below with Saturn would have come to hear of the fight between us. It is better for both of us that he should have curbed his anger and kept out of my reach, for I should have had much trouble with him. Take then your tasselled aegis and shake it furiously, so as to set the Achaean heroes in a panic. Take, moreover, brave Hector, O far darter, into your own care, and rouse him to deeds of daring, till the Achaeans are sent flying back to their ships and to the Hellespont. From that point I will think it well over, how the Achaeans may have a respite from their troubles." Apollo obeyed his father's saying, and left the crest of Ida, flying like a falcon, bane of doves, and swiftest of all birds. He found Hector no longer lying upon the ground, but sitting up, for he had just come to himself again. He knew those who were about him, and the sweat and hard breathing had left him from the moment when the will of aegis-bearing Jove had revived him. Apollo stood beside him and said, "Hector, son of Priam, why are you so faint, and why are you here away from the others? Has any mishap befallen you?" Hector in a weak voice answered, "And which, kind sir, of the gods are you who now ask me thus? Do you not know that Ajax struck me on the chest with a stone as I was killing his comrades at the ships of the Achaeans, and compelled me to leave off fighting? I made sure that this very day I should breathe my last and go down into the house of Hades." Then King Apollo said to him, "Take heart. The son of Saturn has sent you a mighty helper from Ida to stand by you and defend you, even me, Phoebus, Apollo of the golden sword, who have been my guardian hitherto not only of yourself, but of your city. Now, therefore, order your horsemen to drive their chariots to the ships in great multitudes, I will go before your horses to smooth the way for them, and will turn the Achaeans in flight." As he spoke, he infused great strength into the shepherd of his people, and as a horse, stabled and full-fed, breaks loose and gallops gloriously over the plain to the place where he is wont to take his bath in the river. He tosses his head, and his mane streams over his shoulders, as in all the pride of his strength he flies full speed to the pastures where the mares are feeding. Even so Hector, when he heard what the god said, urged his horsemen on, and sped forward as fast as his limbs could take him, as country peasants set their hounds on to a homed stag or wild goat. He has taken shelter under rock or thicket, and they cannot find him, but, lo, a bearded lion whom their shouts have roused stands in their path, and they are in no further humour for the chase. Even so the Achaeans were still charging on in a body, using their swords and spears pointed at both ends. But when they saw Hector going about among his men, they were afraid, and their hearts fell down into their feet. Then spoke Thoas, son of Andraemon, leader of the Aetolians, a man who could throw a good throw, and who was staunch also in close fight, while few could surpass him in debate when opinions were divided. He then, with all sincerity and goodwill, addressed them thus: "What, in heaven's name, do I now see? Is it not Hector come to life again? Everyone made sure he had been killed by Ajax, son of Telamon, but it seems that one of the gods has again rescued him. He has killed many of us Danaans already, and I take it will yet do so, for the hand of Jove must be with him, or he would never dare show himself so masterful in the forefront of the battle. Now, therefore, let us all do as I say. Let us order the main body of our forces to fall back upon the ships, but let those of us who profess to be the flower of the army stand firm, and see whether we cannot hold Hector back at the point of our spears as soon as he comes near us. I conceive that he will then think better of it before he tries to charge into the press of the Danaans." Thus did he speak, and they did even as he had said. Those who were about Ajax and King Idomeneus, the followers moreover of Teucer, Meriones, and Meges, peer of Mars, called all their best men about them and sustained the fight against Hector and the Trojans, but the main body fell back upon the ships of the Achaeans. The Trojans pressed forward in a dense body, with Hector striding on at their head. Before him went Phoebus Apollo, shrouded in cloud about his shoulders. He bore aloft the terrible aegis with its shaggy fringe, which Vulcan the smith had given Jove to strike terror into the hearts of men. With this in his hand, he led on the Trojans. The Argives held together and stood their ground. The cry of battle rose high from either side, and the arrows flew from the bowstrings. Many a spear sped from strong hands, and fastened in the bodies of many a valiant warrior, while others fell to earth midway before they could taste of man's fair flesh, and glut themselves with blood. So long as Phoebus Apollo held his aegis quietly, and without shaking it, the weapons on either side took effect, and the people fell. But when he shook it straight in the face of the Danaans, and raised his mighty battle cry, their hearts fainted within them, and they forgot their former prowess. As when two wild beasts spring in the dead of night on a herd of cattle, or a large flock of sheep, when the herdsman is not there, even so were the Danaans struck helpless, for Apollo filled them with panic and gave victory to Hector and the Trojans. The fight then became more scattered, and they killed one another where they best could. Hector killed Stichius and Arcesilaus, the one leader of the Boeotians, and the other friend and comrade of Menestheus. Aeneas killed Medon and Iasus. The first was bastard son to Oileus, and brother to Ajax, but he lived in Phyllis away from his own country, for he had killed a man, a kinsman of his stepmother Eriopis, whom Aeneas had married. Aeacus had become a leader of the Athenians, and was son of Sphelus, the son of Boucolos. Polydamas killed Megistius and Palates Echius in the front of the battle, while Agenor slew Clonius. Paris struck Deicus from behind in the lower part of the shoulder, as he was flying among the foremost, and the point of the spear went clean through him. While they were spoiling these heroes of their armour, the Achaeans were flying pell-mell to the trench and the stakes, and were forced back within their wall. Hector then cried out to the Trojans, "Forward to the ships, and let the spoils be. If I see any man keeping back on the other side, the wall away from the ships, I will have him killed. His kinsmen and kinswomen shall not give him his dues of fire, but dogs shall tear him in pieces in front of our city." As he spoke, he laid his whip about his horse's shoulders and called to the Trojans throughout their ranks. The Trojans shouted with a cry that rent the air, and kept their horses neck and neck with his own. Phoebus Apollo went before, and kicked down the banks of the deep trench into its middle, so as to make a great broad bridge, as broad as the throw of a spear, when a man is trying his strength. The Trojan battalions poured over the bridge, and Apollo with his redoubtable aegis led the way. He kicked down the wall of the Achaeans as easily as a child who, playing on the seashore, has built a house of sand and then kicks it down again and destroys it. Even so did you, O Apollo, shed toil and trouble upon the Argives, filling them with panic and confusion. Thus then were the Achaeans hemmed in at their ships, calling out to one another, and raising their hands with loud cries, every man to heaven. Nestor of Gerene, tower of strength to the Achaeans, lifted up his hands to the starry firmament of heaven, and prayed more fervently than any of them. "Father Jove," said he, "if ever anyone in wheat-growing Argos burned you fat thigh bones of sheep or heifer and prayed that he might return safely home, whereon you bowed your head to him, in assent, bear it in mind now, and suffer not the Trojans to triumph thus over the Achaeans." All counselling Jove thundered loudly in answer to thy prayer of the aged son of Neleus. When they heard Jove thunder, they flung themselves yet more fiercely on the Achaeans, as a wave breaking over the bulwarks of a ship when the sea runs high before a gale. For it is the force of the wind that makes the waves so great. Even so did the Trojans spring over the wall with a shout and drive their chariots onwards. The two sides fought with their double-pointed spears in hand-to-hand encounter, the Trojans from their chariots, and the Achaeans climbing up into their ships and wielding the long pikes that were lying on the decks, ready for use in a sea fight, jointed and shod with bronze. Now Patroclus, so long as the Achaeans and Trojans were fighting about the wall, but were not yet within it, and at the ships, remained sitting in the tent of good Eurypylus, entertaining him with his conversation, and spreading herbs over his wound to ease his pain. When, however, he saw the Trojans swarming through the breach in the wall, while the Achaeans were clamouring, and struck with panic, he cried aloud, and smote his two thighs with the flat of his hands. "Eurypylus," said he in his dismay, "I know you want me badly, but I cannot stay with you any longer, for there is hard fighting going on. A servant shall take care of you now, for I must make all speed to Achilles, and induce him to fight if I can. Who knows, but, with heaven's help, I may persuade him. A man does well to listen to the advice of a friend." When he had thus spoken, he went his way. The Achaeans stood firm and resisted the attack of the Trojans, yet though these were fewer in number, they could not drive them back from the ships, neither could the Trojans break the Achaean ranks and make their way in among the tents and ships, as a carpenter's line gives a true edge to a piece of ship's timber in the hand of some skilled workman as instructed in all kinds of useful arts. Even so, level was the issue of the fight between the two sides, as they fought some round one, and some round another. Hector made straight for Ajax, and the two fought fiercely about the same ship. Hector could not force Ajax back and fire the ship, nor yet could Ajax drive Hector from the spot to which heaven had brought him. Then Ajax struck Callitor, son of Clytius, in the chest with a spear as he was bringing fire towards the ship. He fell heavily to the ground, and the torch dropped from his hand. When Hector saw his cousin fallen in front of the ship, he shouted to the Trojans and Lycians, saying, "Trojans, Lycians, and Dardanians, good in close fight, bate not a jot, but rescue the son of Clytius, lest the Achaeans strip him of his armour now that he has fallen." He then aimed a spear at Ajax, and missed him, but he hit Lycophron, a follower of Ajax, who came from Cythera, but was living with Ajax, inasmuch as he had killed a man among the Cythereans. Hector's spear struck him on the head, below the ear, and he fell headlong from the ship's prow onto the ground, with no life left in him. Ajax shook with rage and said to his brother, "Teucer, my good fellow, our trusty comrade, the son of Master, has fallen. He came to live with us from Cythera, and whom we honoured as much as our own parents. Hector has just killed him. Fetch your deadly arrows at once, and the bow which Phoebus Apollo gave you." Teucer heard him, and hastened towards him with his bow and quiver in his hands. Forthwith he showered his arrows on the Trojans, and hit Clytus, the son of Pisenor, comrade of Polydamas, the noble son of Panthus, with the reins in his hands, as he was attending to his horses. He was in the middle of the very thickest part of the fight, doing good service to Hector and the Trojans, but evil had now come upon him, and not one of those who were fain to do so could avert it, for the arrow struck him on the back of the neck. He fell from his chariot, and his horses shook the empty car as they swerved aside. King Polydamas saw what had happened, and was the first to come up to the horses. He gave them in charge to Astinus, son of Proteon, and ordered him to look on, and to keep the horses near at hand. He then went back and took his place in the front ranks. Teucer then aimed another arrow at Hector, and there would have been no more fighting at the ships if he had hit him and killed him then and there. Jove, however, who kept watch over Hector, had his eyes on Teucer, and deprived him of his triumph by breaking his bowstring for him just as he was drawing it and about to take his aim. On this the arrow went astray, and the bow fell from his hands. Teucer shook with anger, and said to his brother, "Alas, see how heaven thwarts us in all we do. It has broken my bowstring, and snatched the bow from my hand, though I strung it this self-same morning, that it might serve me for many an arrow." Ajax, son of Telamon, answered, "My good fellow, let your bow and your arrows be, for Jove has made them useless in order to spite the Danaans. Take your spear, lay your shield upon your shoulder, and both fight the Trojans yourself, and urge others to do so. They may be successful for the moment, but if we fight as we ought, they will find it a hard matter to take the ships." Teucer then took his bow and put it by in his tent. He hung a shield 4 hides thick about his shoulders, and on his comely head he set his helmet well wrought, with a crest of horsehair that nodded menacingly above it. He grasped his redoubtable bronze-shod spear, and forthwith he was by the side of Ajax. When Hector saw that Teucer's bow was of no more use to him, he shouted out to the Trojans and Lycians, "Trojans, Lycians, and Dardanians, good in close fight. Be men, my friends, and show your mettle here at the ships, for I see the weapon of one of their chieftains made useless by the hand of Jove. It is easy to see when Jove is helping people, and means to help the ships and fight. If any of you is struck by spear or sword and loses his life, let him die. He dies with honour who dies fighting for his country, and he will leave his wife and children safe behind him, with his house and allotment unplundered. If only the Achaeans can be driven back to their own land, they and their ships. With these words he put heart and soul into them all. Ajax, on the other side, exhorted his comrades, saying, "Shame on you, Argives, we are now utterly undone, unless we can save ourselves by driving the enemy from our ships. Do you think, if Hector takes them, that you will be able to get home by land? Can you not hear him cheering on his whole host to fire our fleet, and bidding them remember that they are not at a dance but in battle? Our only course is to fight them with might and main. We had better chance it, life or death, once for all, than fight long and without issue, hemmed in at our ships by worse men than ourselves." With these words he put life and soul into them all. Hector then killed Ascanius, son of Perimedes, leader of the Phocians, and Ajax killed Laodamas, captain of foot soldiers and son to Antenor. Polydamas killed Otus of Cyllene, a comrade of the son of Phyleus and chief of the proud Epians. When Meges saw this, he sprang upon him, but Polydamas crouched down, and he missed him, for Apollo would not suffer the son of Panthers to fall in battle. But the spear hit Chroesmus in the middle of his chest, whereon he fell heavily to the ground, and Meges stripped him of his armour. At that moment the valiant soldier, Dolops, son of Lampus, sprang upon Lampus, was son of Laomedon, and for his valour, while his son Dolops was versed in all the ways of war. He then struck the middle of the son of Phyleus' shield with his spear, setting on him at close quarters, but his good corslet made with plates of metal saved him. Phyleus had brought it from Ephora and the river Selles, where his host, King Euphetes, had given it him to wear in battle and protect him. It now served to save the life of his son. Then Meges struck the topmost crest of Dolops's bronze helmet with his spear and tore away its plume of horsehair, so that all newly dyed with scarlet as it was, it tumbled down into the dust. While he was still fighting and confident of victory, Menelaus came up to help Meges and got by the side of Dolops unperceived. He then speared him in the shoulder from behind, and the point, driven so furiously, went through into his chest, whereon he fell headlong. The two then made towards him to strip him of his armour, but Hector called on all his brothers for help, and he especially upbraided brave Melanippus, son of Hicetaon, who while used to pasture his herds of cattle in Percot before the war broke out. But when the ships of the Danaans came, he went back to Ilias, where he was eminent among the Trojans, and lived near Priam, who treated him as one of his own sons. Hector now rebuked him and said, "Why, Melanippus, are we thus remiss? Do you take no note of the death of your kinsman, and do you not see how they are trying to take Dolops' armour? Follow me. There must be no fighting the Argives from a distance now, but we must do so in close combat, till either we kill them or they take the high wall of Ilias and slay her people." He led on as he spoke, and the hero Melanippus followed after. Meanwhile Ajax, son of Telamon, was cheering on the Argives. "My friends," he cried, "be men and fear dishonour. Quit yourselves in battle so as to win respect from one another. Men who respect each other's good opinion are less likely to be killed than those who do not, but in flight there is neither gain nor glory." Thus did he exhort men who were already bent upon driving back the Trojans. They laid his words to heart, and hedged the ships as with a wall of bronze, while Jove urged on the Trojans. Menelaus of the loud battle cry urged Antilochus on. Antilochus, said he, "you are young, and there is none of the Achaeans more fleet of foot or more valiant than you are. See if you cannot spring upon some Trojan and kill him." He hurried away when he had thus spurred Antilochus, who at once darted out from the front ranks and aimed a spear, after looking carefully round him. The Trojans fell back as he threw, and the dart did not speed from his hand without effect, for it struck Melanippus, the proud son of Hicetaon, in the breast by the nipple as he was coming forward, and his armour rang rattling round him as he fell heavily to the ground. Antilochus sprang upon him as a dog springs on a fawn which a hunter has hit as it was breaking away from its covert, and killed it. Even so, O Melanippus, did stalwart Antilochus spring upon you to strip you of your armour, but noble Hector marked him, and came running up to him through the thick of the battle. Antilochus, brave soldier though he was, would not stay to face him, but fled like some savage creature which knows it has done wrong, and flies when it has killed a dog or a man who is herding his cattle, before a body of men can be gathered to attack it. Even so did the son of Nestor fly, and the Trojans and Hector, with a cry that rent the air, showered their weapons after him, nor did he turn round and stay his flight till he had reached his comrades. The Trojans, fierce as lions, were still rushing on towards the ships in fulfilment of the behests of Jove, who kept spurring them on to new deeds of daring, while he deadened the courage of the Argives and defeated them by encouraging the Trojans. For he meant giving glory to Hector son of Priam, and letting him throw fire upon the ships till he had fulfilled the unrighteous prayer that Thetis had made him. Jove, therefore, bided his time till he should see the glare of a blazing ship. From that hour he was about so to order that the Trojans should be driven back from the ships, and to vouchsafe glory to the Achaeans. With this purpose he inspired Hector son of Priam, who was cager enough already, to assail the ships. His fury was as that of Mars, or as when a fire is raging in the glades of some dense forest upon the mountains. He foamed at the mouth, his eyes glared under his terrible eyebrows, and his helmet quivered on his temples by reason of the fury with which he fought. Jove from heaven was with him, and though he was but one against many, vouchsafed him victory and glory, for he was doomed to an early death, and already Pallas Minerva was hurrying on the hour of his destruction at the hands of the son of Peleus. Now, however, he kept trying to break the ranks of the enemy wherever he could see them thickest and in the goodliest armour, but do what he might, he could not break through them, for they stood as a tower foursquare, or as some high cliff rising from the grey sea that braves the anger of the gale and of the waves that thunder up against it. He fell upon them like flames of fire from every quarter, as when a wave, raised mountain high by wind and storm, breaks over a ship and covers it deep in foam. The fierce winds roar against the mast, the hearts of the sailors fail them for fear, and they are saved but by a very little from destruction. Even so were the hearts of the Achaeans fainting within them, or as a savage lion attacking a herd of cows, while they are feeding by thousands in the low-lying meadows by some wide, watered shore. The herdsman is at his wit's end how to protect his herd, and keeps going about now in the van, and now in the rear of his cattle, while the lion springs into the thick of them, and fastens on a cow, so that they all tremble for fear. Even so were the Achaeans utterly panic-stricken by Hector and Father Jove. Nevertheless, Hector only killed Periphetes of Mycenae. He was son of Copreus, who was wont to take the orders of King Eurystheus to mighty Hercules. But the son was a far better man than the father in every way. He was fleet of foot, a valiant warrior, and in Mycenae. He it was who then afforded Hector a triumph, for as he was turning back, he stumbled against the rim of his shield, which reached his feet and served to keep the javelins off him. He tripped against this and fell face upward, his helmet ringing loudly about his head as he did so. Hector saw him fall and ran up to him. He then thrust a spear into his chest and killed him close to his own comrades. These, for all their sorrow, could not help him, for they were themselves terribly afraid of Hector. They had now reached the ships, and the prows of those that had been drawn up first were on every side of them, but the Trojans came pouring after them. The Argives were driven back from the first row of ships, but they made a stand by their tents without being broken up and scattered. Shame and fear restrained them. They kept shouting incessantly to one another, and Nestor of Gerene, tower of strength to the Achaeans, was loudest in imploring every man by his parents, and beseeching him to stand firm. "Be men, my friends," he cried, "and respect one another's good opinion. Think, all of you, on your children, your wives, your property, and your parents, whether these be alive or dead. On their behalf, though they are not here, I implore you to stand firm, and not to turn in flight." With these words he put heart and soul into them all. Minerva lifted the thick veil of darkness from their eyes, and much light fell upon them, alike on the side of the ships, and on that where the fight was raging. They could see Hector and all his men, both those in the rear who were taking no part in the battle, and those who were fighting by the ships. Ajax could not bring himself to retreat along with the rest, but strode from deck to deck, with a great sea pike in his hands, 12 cubits long, and jointed with rings. As a man skilled in feats of horsemanship couples 4 horses together, and comes tearing full speed along the public way from the country into some large town, many, both men and women, marvel as they see him, for he keeps all the time changing his horse, springing from one to another without ever missing his feet, while the horses are at a gallop. Even so did Ajax go striding from one ship's deck to another, and his voice went up into the heavens. He kept on shouting his orders to the Danaans, and exhorting them to defend their ships and tents. Neither did Hector remain within the main body of the Trojan warriors, but, as a dun eagle swoops down upon a flock of wild fowl feeding near a river geese, it may be, or cranes, or long-necked swans, even so did Hector make straight for a dark-prowed ship, rushing right towards it, for Jove, with his mighty hand, impelled him forward, and roused his people to follow him. And now the battle again raged furiously at the ships. You would have thought the men were coming on fresh and unwearied, so fiercely did they fight, and this was the mind in which they were. The Achaeans did not believe they should escape destruction, but thought themselves doomed, while there was not a Trojan, but his heart beat high, with the hope of firing the ships and putting the Achaean heroes to the sword. Thus were the 2 sides minded. Then Hector seized the stern of the good ship that had brought Protesilaus to Troy, but never bore him back to his native land. Round this ship there raged a close hand-to-hand fight between Danaans and Trojans. They did not fight at a distance with bows and javelins, but with one mind act at one another in close combat, with their mighty swords and spears pointed at both ends. They fought moreover with keen battle-axes and with hatchets. Many a good stout blade, hilted and scabbarded with iron, fell from hand or shoulder as they fought, and the earth ran red with blood. Hector, when he had seized the ship, would not loose his hold, but held on to its curved stern, and shouted to the Trojans, "Bring fire, and raise the battle cry, all of you with a single voice. Now has Jove vouchsafed us a day that will pay us for all the rest. This day we shall take the ships which came hither against heaven's will, and which have caused us such infinite suffering through the cowardice of our counsellors." cheers me on." As he spoke thus, the Trojans sprang yet more fiercely on the Achaeans, and Ajax no longer held his ground, for he was overcome by the darts that were flung at him, and made sure that he was doomed. Therefore he left the raised deck at the stern, and stepped back onto the 7-foot bench of the oarsmen. Here he stood on the lookout, and with his spear held back Trojan whom he saw bringing fire to the ships. All the time he kept on shouting at the top of his voice, and exhorting the Danaans. "My friends," he cried, "Danaan heroes, servants of Mars, be men, my friends, and fight with might and with main. Can we hope to find helpers hereafter, or a wall to shield us more surely than the one we have? There is no strong city within reach whence we may draw fresh forces to turn the scales in our favour. We are on the plain of the armed Trojans with the sea behind us, and far from our own country. Our salvation, therefore, is in the might of our hands and in hard fighting." As he spoke, he wielded his spear with still greater fury, and when any Trojan made towards the ships with fire at Hector's bidding, he would be on the lookout for him and drive at him with his long spear. 12 men did he thus kill in hand-to-hand fight before the ships. Book 16. Thus did they fight about the ship of Protesilaus. Then Patroclus drew near to Achilles, with tears welling from his eyes, as from some spring whose crystal stream falls over the ledges of a high precipice. When Achilles saw him thus weeping, he was sorry for him and said, "Why, Patroclus, do you stand there weeping like some silly child that comes running to her mother and begs to be taken up and carried? She catches hold of her mother's dress to stay her though she is in a hurry, and looks tearfully up until her mother carries her. Even such tears, Patroclus, are you now shedding? Have you anything to say to the Myrmidons or to myself, or have you had news from Paithia, which you alone know? They tell me Menœtius, son of Actor, is still alive, as also Peleus, son of Aeacus, among the Myrmidons, men whose loss we too should bitterly deplore. Or are you grieving about the Argives and the way in which they are being killed at the ships through their own high-handed doings? Do not hide anything from me, but tell me that both of us may know about it." "Then, O knight Patroclus, with a deep sigh you answered, 'Achilles, son of Peleus, foremost champion of the Achaeans, do not be angry, but I weep for the disaster that has now befallen the Argives. All those who have been their champions so far are lying at the ships, wounded by sword or spear. Brave Diomed, son of Tydeus, has been hit with a spear, while famed Ulysses and Agamemnon have received sword wounds. Eurypylus again has been struck with an arrow in the thigh. Skilled apothecaries are attending to these heroes and healing them of their wounds. Are you still, O Achilles, so inexorable? May it never be my lot to nurse such a passion as you have done, to the baning of your own good name. Who in future story will speak well of you, unless you now save the Argives from ruin? You know no pity. Knight Peleus was not your father, nor Thetis your mother, but the grey sea bore you, and the sheer cliffs begot you, so cruel and remorseless are you. If, however, you are kept back through knowledge of some oracle, or if your mother Thetis has told you something from the mouth of Jove, at least send me and the Myrmidons with me, if I may bring deliverance to the Danaans. Let me, moreover, wear your armour. The Trojans may thus mistake me for you, and quit the field, so that the hard-pressed sons of the Achaeans may have breathing time, which, while they are fighting, may hardly be. We, who are fresh, might soon drive tired men back from our ships and tents to their own city." He knew was suing for his own destruction, Achilles was deeply moved and answered, "What, noble Patroclus, are you saying? I know no prophecies which I am heeding, nor has my mother told me anything from the mouth of Jove, but I am cut to the very heart that one of my own rank should dare to rob me because he is more powerful than I am. This, after all that I have gone through, is more than I can endure. The girl whom the sons of the Achaeans chose for me, whom I won as the fruit of my spear on having sacked a city, her has King Agamemnon taken from me as though I were some common vagrant. Still, let bygones be bygones. No man may keep his anger for ever. I said I would not relent till battle, and the cry of war had reached my own ships. Nevertheless, now gird my armour about your shoulders, and lead the Myrmidons to battle, for the dark cloud of Trojans has burst furiously over our fleet. The Argives are driven back onto the beach, cooped within a narrow space, and the whole people of Troy has taken heart to sally out against them, because they see not the visor of my helmet gleaming near them. Had they seen this, there would not have been a creek nor grip that had not been filled with their dead as they fled back again. And so it would have been, if only King Agamemnon had dealt fairly by me. As it is, the Trojans have beset our host. Diomed, son of Tydeus, no longer wields his spear to defend the Danaans, neither have I heard the voice of the son of Atreus coming from his hated head, whereas that of murderous Hector rings in my cars as he gives orders to the Trojans, who triumph over the Achaeans and fill the whole plain with their cry of battle. But even so, Patroclus, fall upon them and save the fleet, lest the Trojans fire it and prevent us from being able to return. Do, however, as I now bid you, that you may win me great honour from all the Danaans, and that they may restore the girl to me again, and give me rich gifts into the bargain. When you have driven the Trojans from the ships, come back again. Though Juno's thundering husband should put triumph within your reach, do not fight the Trojans further in my absence, or you will rob me of glory that should be mine. And do not, for lust of battle, go on killing the Trojans, nor lead the Achaeans on to Iliad, lest one of the ever-living gods from Olympus attack you. For Phoebus Apollo loves them well. Return when you have freed the ships from peril, and let others wage war upon the plain. Would, by Father Jove, Minerva, and Apollo, that not a single man of all the Trojans might be left alive, nor yet of the Argives, but that we two might be alone, left to tear aside the mantle that veils the brow of Troy. Thus did they converse. But Ajax could no longer hold his ground for the shower of darts that rained upon him. The will of Jove and the javelins of the Trojans were too much for him. The helmet that gleamed about his temples rang with the continuous clatter of the missiles that kept pouring onto it and onto the cheek pieces that protected his face. Moreover, his left shoulder was tired with having held his shield so long, yet for all this, let fly at him as they would, they could not make him give ground. He could hardly draw his breath. The sweat rained from every pore of his body. He had not a moment's respite, and on all sides he was beset by danger upon danger. And now, tell me, O Muses that hold your mansions on Olympus, how fire was thrown upon the ships of the Achaeans. Hector came close up, and let drive with his great sword at the ashen spear of Ajax. He cut it clean in two just behind where the point was fastened onto the shaft of the spear. Ajax therefore had now nothing but a headless spear, while the bronze point flew some way off and came ringing down onto the ground. Ajax knew the hand of heaven in this, and was dismayed at seeing that Jove had now left him utterly defenceless, and was willing victory for the Trojans. Therefore he drew back, and the Trojans flung fire upon the ship, which was at once wrapped in flame. The fire was now flaring about the ship's stern, whereon Achilles smote his two thighs, and said to Patroclus, "Up, noble knight, for I see the glare of hostile fire at our fleet. Up, lest they destroy our ships, and there be no way by which we may retreat. Gird on your armour at once while I call our people together." As he spoke, Patroclus put on his armour. First he greaved his legs with greaves of good make, and fitted with ankle clasps of silver. After this he donned the cuirass of the son of Aeacus, richly inlaid and studded. He hung his silver-studded sword of bronze about his shoulders, and then his mighty shield. On his comely head he set his helmet, well wrought, with a crest of horsehair that nodded menacingly above it. He grasped 2 redoubtable spears that suited his hands, but he did not take the spear of noble Achilles, so stout and strong, for none other of the Achaeans could wield it, though Achilles could do so easily. This was the ashen spear from Mount Pelion, which Chiron had cut upon a mountain top, and had given to Peleus, wherewith to deal out death among heroes. He bade Automedon yoke his horses with all speed, for he was the man whom he held in honour next after Achilles, and on whose support in battle he could rely most firmly. Automedon therefore yoked the fleet horses Xanthus and Palius, steeds that could fly like the wind. These were they whom the harpy Podarge bore to the west wind, as she was grazing in a meadow by the waters of the river Oceanus. In the side traces he set the noble horse Pedasus, whom Achilles had brought away with him when he sacked the city of Eetion, and who, mortal steed though he was, could take his place along with those that were immortal. Meanwhile Achilles went about everywhere among the tents, and bade his Myrmidons put on their armour. Even as fierce ravening wolves that are feasting upon a homed stag, which they have killed upon the mountains, and their jaws are red with blood, they go in a pack to lap water from the clear spring with their long, thin tongues, and they reek of blood and slaughter. They know not what fear is, for it is hunger drives them. Even so did the leaders and counsellors of the Myrmidons gather round the good squire of the fleet descendant of Aeacus, and among them stood Achilles, himself cheering on both men and horses. 50 ships had noble Achilles brought to Troy, and in each there was a crew of 50 oarsmen. Over these he set 5 captains whom he could trust, while he was himself commander over them all. Menestheus of the gleaming corslet, son to the river Spercheius, that streams from heaven, was captain of the first company. Fair Polydora, daughter of Peleus, bore him to ever-flowing Spercheius, a woman mated with a god, but he was called son of Borus, son of Pereas, with whom his mother was living as his wedded wife, and who gave great wealth to gain her. The second company was led by noble Eutorus, son to an unwedded woman. Polymele, daughter of Phylas the graceful dancer, bore him. The mighty slayer of Argos was enamoured of her as he saw her among the singing women, at a dance held in honour of Diana, the rushing huntress of the golden arrows. He therefore, Mercury, giver of all good, went with her into an upper chamber, and lay with her in secret, whereon she bore him a noble son, Eutorus, singularly fleet of foot, and in fight valiant. When Ilithuia, goddess of the pains of childbirth, brought him to the light of day, and he saw the face of the sun, mighty Achilles, son of Actor, took the mother to wife, and gave great wealth to gain her. But her father Phylas brought the child up, and took care of him, doting as fondly upon him as though he were his own son. The third company was led by Pisander, son of Maimalus, the finest spearman among all the Myrmidons, next to Achilles' own comrade, Patroclus. The old knight Phoenix was captain of the fourth company, and Alcimedon, noble son of Laerceus of the fifth. When Achilles had his men, and had stationed them all, with their captains, he charged them straitly, saying, Myrmidons, remember your threats against the Trojans, while you were at the ships in the time of my anger, and you were all complaining of me. Cruel son of Peleus, you would say, your mother must have suckled you on gall, so ruthless are you. You keep us here at the ships against our will. If you are so relentless, it were better we went home over the sea. Often have you gathered, and thus chided with me. The hour is now come for those high feats of arms that you have so long been pining for. Therefore keep high hearts each one of you to do battle with the Trojans. With these words he put heart and soul into them all, and they serried their companies yet more closely when they heard thee of their king, as the stones which a builder sets in the wall of some high house, which is to give shelter from the winds. Even so closely were the helmets and bossed shields set against one another. Shield pressed on shield, helm on helm, and man on man. So close were they, that the horsehair plumes on the gleaming ridges of the helmets touched each other as they bent their heads. In front of them all two men put on their armour, Patroclus and Automedon, two men with but one mind to lead the Myrmidons. Then Achilles went inside his tent and opened the lid of the strong chest which silver-footed Thetis had given him to take on board ship, and which she had filled with shirts, cloaks, to keep out the cold, and good thick rugs. In this chest he had a cup of rare workmanship, from which no man but himself might drink, nor would he make offering from it to any other god, save only to Father Jove. He took the cup from the chest, and cleansed it with sulphur. This done, he rinsed it clean water, and after he had washed his hands, he drew wine. Then he stood in the middle of the court and prayed, looking towards heaven, and making his drink offering of wine. Nor was he unseen of Jove, whose joy is in thunder. King Jove, he cried, Lord of Dodona, God of the Pelasgi, who dwellest afar, you who hold wintry Dodona in your sway, where your prophets, the Selli, dwell around you with their feet unwashed and their couches made upon the ground. If you heard me when I prayed to you aforetime, and did me honour while you sent disaster on the Achaeans, vouchsafe me now the fulfilment of yet this further prayer. I shall stay here where my ships are lying, but I shall send my comrade into battle at the head of many Myrmidons. Grant, O all-seeing Jove, that victory may go with him. Put your courage into his heart, that Hector may learn whether my squire is man enough to fight alone, or whether his might is only then so indomitable when I myself enter the turmoil of war. Afterwards, when he has chased the fight and the cry of battle from the ships, grant that he may return unharmed, with his armour and his comrades, fighters in close combat. Thus did he pray, and all counselling Jove heard his prayer. Part of it he did indeed vouchsafe him, but not the whole. He granted that Patroclus should thrust back war and battle from the ships, but refused to let him come safely out of the fight. When he had made his drink offering, and had thus prayed, Achilles went inside his tent, and put back the cup into his chest. Then he again came out, for he still loved to look upon the fierce fight that raged between the Trojans and Achaeans. Meanwhile, the armed band that was about Patroclus marched on, till they sprang high in hope upon the Trojans. They came swarming out like wasps, whose nests are by the roadside, and whom silly children love to tease, whereon anyone who happens to be passing may get stung. Or again, if a wayfarer going along the road vexes them by accident, every wasp will come flying out in a fury to defend his little ones. Even with such rage and courage did the Myrmidons swarm from their ships, and their cry of battle rose heavenwards. Patroclus called out to his men at the top of his voice, Myrmidons, followers of Achilles, son of Peleus, be men, my friends, fight with might and with main, that we may win glory for the son of Peleus, who is far the foremost man at the ships of the Argives, he and his close fighting followers. The son of Atreus, King Agamemnon, will thus learn his folly in showing no respect to the bravest of the Achaeans. With these words he put heart and soul into them all, and they fell in a body upon the Trojans. The ships rang again with the cry which the Achaeans raised, and when the Trojans saw the brave son of Menoetius and his squire all gleaming in their armour, they were daunted, and their battalions were thrown into confusion, for they thought the fleet son of Peleus must now have put aside his anger, and have been reconciled to Agamemnon. Everyone therefore looked round about to see whither he might fly for safety. Patroclus first aimed a spear into the middle of the press, where men were packed most closely by the stern of the ship of Protesilaus. He hit Pyrechmus, who had led his Paeonian horsemen from the Amadon and the broad waters of the river Axius. The spear struck him on the right shoulder, and with a groan he fell backwards in the dust. On this his men were thrown into confusion, for by killing their leader, who was the finest soldier among them, Patroclus struck panic into them all. He thus drove them from the ship and quenched the fire that was then blazing, leaving the half-burnt ship to lie where it was. The Trojans were now driven back with a shout that rent the skies, while the Danaans poured after them from their ships, shouting also without ceasing, as when Jove, gatherer of the thundercloud, spreads a dense canopy on the top of some lofty mountain, and all the peaks, the jutting headlands, and forest glades show out in the great light that flashes from the bursting heavens. Even so, when the Danaans had now driven back the fire from their ships, they took breath for a little while. But the fury of the fight was not yet over, for the Trojans were not driven back in utter rout, but still gave battle, and were ousted from their ground only by sheer fighting. The fight then became more scattered, and the chieftains killed one another when and how they could. The valiant son of Menoetius first drove his spear into the thigh of Areilycus just as he was turning round. The point went clean through and broke the bone, so that he fell forward. Meanwhile Menelaus struck Thoas in the chest, where it was exposed near the rim of his shield, and he fell dead. The son of Phyleus saw Amphiclus about to attack him, and ere he could do so took aim at the upper part of his thigh, where the muscles are thicker than in any other part. The spear tore through all the sinews of the leg, and his eyes were closed in darkness. Of the sons of Nestor one, Antilochus speared Atimneus, driving the point of the spear through his throat, and down he fell. Maris then sprang on Antilochus in hand-to-hand fight to avenge his brother, and bestrode the body spear in hand, but valiant Thrasymedes was too quick for him, and in a moment had struck him in the shoulder ere he could deal his blow. His aim was true, and the spear severed all the muscles at the root of his arm, and tore them right down to the bone, so he fell heavily to the ground, and his eyes were closed in darkness. Thus did these two noble comrades of Sarpedon go down to Erebus, slain by the two sons of Nestor. They were the warrior sons of Amisidorus, who had reared the invincible Chimera, to the bane of many. Ajax, son of Oileus, sprang on Cleobulus and took him alive as he was entangled in the crush, but he killed him then and there by a sword blow on the neck. The sword reeked with his blood, while dark death and the strong hand of fate gripped him and closed his eyes. Peneleos and Lycon now met in close fight, for they had missed each other with their spears. They had both thrown without effect, so now they drew their swords. Lycon struck the plumed crest of Peneleos' helmet, but his sword broke at the hilt, while Peneleos smote Lycon on the neck under the ear. The blade sank so deep that the head was held on by nothing but the skin, and there was no more life left in him. Meriones gave chase to Acamas on foot, and caught him up just as he was about to mount his chariot. He drove a spear through his right shoulder, so that he fell headlong from the car, and his eyes were closed in darkness. Idomeneus speared Erymas in the mouth. The bronze point of the spear went clean through it beneath the brain, crashing in among the white bones and smashing them up. His teeth were all of them knocked out, and the blood came gushing in a stream from both his eyes. It also came gurgling up from his mouth and nostrils, and the darkness of death enfolded him round about. Thus did these chieftains of the Danaans each of them kill his man, as ravening wolves seize on kids or lambs, fastening on them when they are alone on the hillsides and have strayed from the main flock through the carelessness of the shepherd. And when the wolves see this, they pounce upon them at once, because they cannot defend themselves. Even so did the Danaans now fall on the Trojans, who fled with ill-omened cries in their panic, and had no more fight left in them. Meanwhile, great Ajax kept on trying to drive a spear into Hector, but Hector was so skilful that he held his broad shoulders well under cover of his ox-hide shield, ever on the lookout for the whizzing of the arrows and the heavy thud of the spears. He well knew that the fortunes of the day had changed, but still stood his ground and tried to protect his comrades, as when a cloud goes up into heaven from Olympus, rising out of a clear sky when Jove is brewing a gale. Even with such panic-stricken rout did the Trojans now fly, and there was no order in their going. Hector's fleet horses bore him and his armour out of the fight, and he left the Trojan host penned in by the deep trench against their will. Many a yoke of horses snapped the pole of their chariots in the trench, and left their master's car behind them. Patroclus gave chase, calling impetuously on the Danaans, and full of fury against the Trojans, who, being now no longer in a body, filled all the ways with their cries of panic and rout. The air was darkened with the clouds of dust they raised, and the horses strained every nerve in their flight from the tents and ships towards the city. Patroclus kept on heading his horses wherever he saw most men flying in confusion, cheering on his men the while. Chariots were being smashed in all directions, and many a man came tumbling down from his own car to fall beneath the wheels of that of Patroclus, whose immortal steeds, given by the gods to Peleus, sprang over the trench at a bound as they sped onward. He was intent on trying to get near Hector, for he had set his heart on spearing him, but Hector's horses were now hurrying him away. As the whole dark earth bows before some tempest on an autumn day, when Jove rains his hardest to punish men for giving crooked judgment in their courts, and arriving justice therefrom without heed to the decrees of heaven. All the rivers run full, and the torrents tear many a new channel, as they roar headlong from the mountains to the dark sea, and it fares ill with the works of men. Even such was the stress and strain of the Trojan horses in their flight. Patroclus now cut off the battalions that were nearest to him, and drove them back to the ships. They were doing their best to reach the city, but he would not yet them, and bore down on them between the river and the ships and wall. Many a fallen comrade did he then avenge. First he hit Pronus with a spear on the chest, where it was exposed near the rim of his shield, and he fell heavily to the ground. Next he sprang on Thestor son of Enops, who was sitting all huddled up in his chariot, for he had lost his head, and the reins had been torn out of his hands. Patroclus went up to him, and drove a spear into his right jaw. He thus hooked him by the teeth, and the spear pulled him over the rim of his car, as as one who sits at the end of some jutting rock and draws a strong fish out of the sea with a hook and a line. Even so with his spear did he pull Thestor all gaping from his chariot. He then threw him down on his face, and he died while falling. On this, as Euryalus was on to attack him, he struck him full on the head with a stone, and his brains were all battered inside his helmet, whereon he fell headlong to the ground, and the pangs of death took hold upon him. Then he laid low, one after the other, Erymas, Amphoterus, Epaltis, Tlepolemus, Ichius, son of Damastor, Pyrrhus, Alpheus, Euippus, and Polymolus, son of Archias. Now, when Sarpedon saw his comrades, men who wore ungirdled tunics, being overcome by Patroclus, son of Menetius, he rebuked the Lycians, saying, "Shame on you, where are you flying to? Show your mettle. I will myself meet this man in fight, and learn who it is that is so masterful. He has done us much hurt, and has stretched many a brave man upon the ground." He sprang from his chariot as he spoke, and Patroclus, when he saw this, leaped onto the ground also. The two then rushed at one another with loud cries, like eagle-beaked, crook-taloned vultures that scream and tear at one another in some high mountain fastness. The son of scheming Saturn looked down upon them in pity, and said to Juno, who was his wife and sister, "Alas, that it should be the lot of Sarpedon, whom I love so dearly, to perish by the hand of Patroclus. I am in two minds whether to catch him up out of the fight, and set him down, safe and sound, in the fertile land of Lycia, or to let him now fall by the hand of the son of Menetius." And Juno answered, "Most dread son of Saturn, what is this that you are saying? Would you snatch a mortal man, whose doom has long been fated, out of the jaws of death? Do as you will, but we shall not all of us be of your mind. I say further, and lay my saying to your heart, that if you send Sarpedon safely to his own home, some other of the gods will be also wanting to escort his son out of battle, for there are many sons of gods fighting round the city of Troy, and you will make everyone jealous. If, however, you are fond of him and pity him, let him indeed fall by the hand of Patroclus, but as soon as the life is gone out of him, send death and sweet sleep to bear him off the field, and take him to the broad lands of Lycia, where his brothers and his kinsmen will bury him with mound and pillar, in due honour to the dead." The sire of gods and men assented, but he shed a rain of blood upon the earth in honour of his son, whom Patroclus was about to kill on the rich plain of Troy, far from his home. When they were now come close to one another, Patroclus struck Thrasidamus, the brave squire of Sarpedon, in the lower part of the belly, and killed him. Sarpedon then aimed a spear at Patroclus and missed him, but he struck the horse Pegasus in the right shoulder, and it screamed aloud as it lay, groaning in the dust, until the life went out of it. The other two horses began to plunge. The pole of the chariot cracked, and they got entangled in the reins through the fall of the horse that was yoked along with them. But Automedon knew what to do. Without the loss of a moment, he drew the keen blade that hung by his sturdy thigh, and cut the third horse adrift, whereon the other two righted themselves, and pulling hard at the reins again, went together into battle. Sarpedon now took a second aim at Patroclus, and again missed him. The point of the spear passed over his left shoulder without hitting him. Patroclus then aimed in his turn, and the spear sped not from his hand in vain, for he hit Sarpedon just where the midriff surrounds the ever-beating heart. He fell like some oak, or silver poplar, or tall pine to which woodmen have laid their axes upon the mountains, to make timber for shipbuilding. Even so did he lie stretched at full length in front of his chariot and horses, moaning and clutching at the blood-stained dust. springs with a bound upon a herd of cattle and fastens on a great black bull, which dies bellowing in its clutches. Even so did the leader of the Lycian warriors struggle in death as he fell by the hand of Patroclus. He called on his trusty comrade and said, "Glaucus, my brother, hero among heroes, put forth all your strength, fight with might and main. Now, if ever, quit yourself like a valiant soldier. First go about among the Lycian captains, and bid them fight for Sarpedon. Then yourself also do battle to save my armour from being taken. My name will haunt you henceforth, and for ever, if the Achaeans rob me of my armour, now that I have fallen at their ships. Do your very utmost, and call all my people together." Death closed his eyes as he spoke. Patroclus planted his heel on his breast, and drew the spear from his body, whereon his senses came out along with it, and he drew out both spear point and Sarpedon's soul at the same time. Hard by the Myrmidons held his snorting steeds, who were wild with panic at finding themselves deserted by their lords. Glaucus was overcome with grief when he heard what Sarpedon said, for he could not help him. He had to support his arm with his other hand, being in great pain through the wound which Teucer's arrow had given him, when Teucer was defending the wall, as he, Glaucus, was assailing it. Therefore he prayed to far-darting Apollo, saying, "Hear me, O king, from your seat, may be in the rich land of Lycia, or may be in Troy, for in all places you can hear the prayer of one who is in distress, as I now am. I have a grievous wound, my hand is aching with pain, there is no staunching the blood, and my whole arm drags by reason of my hurt, so that I cannot grasp my sword, nor go among my foes, and fight them. Thou, our prince, Jove's son Sarpedon, is slain. Jove defended not his son. Do you, therefore, O king, heal me of my wound, ease my pain, and grant me strength, both to cheer on the Lycians, and to fight along with them round the body of him who has fallen." Thus did he pray, and Apollo heard his prayer. He eased his pain, staunched the black blood from the wound, and gave him new strength. Glaucus perceived this, and was thankful that the mighty god had answered his prayer. Forthwith, therefore, he went among the Lycian captains, and bade them come to fight about the body of Sarpedon. From these he strode on among the Trojans to Polydamas, son of Pantus and Agenor. He then went in search of Aeneas and Hector, and when he had found them, he said, "Hector, you have utterly forgotten your allies, who languish here for your sake, far from friends and home, while you do nothing to support them. Sarpedon, leader of the Lycian warriors, has fallen, he who was at once the right and might of Lycia. Mars has laid him low by the spear of Patroclus. Stand by him, my friends, and suffer not the Myrmidons to strip him of his armour, nor to treat his body with contumely, in revenge for all the Danaans whom we have speared at the ships." As he spoke, the Trojans were plunged in extreme and ungovernable grief, for Sarpedon, alien though he was, had been one of the mainstays of their city, both as having much people with him, and himself the foremost among them all. Led by Hector, who was infuriated by the fall of Sarpedon, they made instantly for the Danaans with all their might, while the undaunted spirit of Patroclus, son of Menœtius, cheered on the Achaeans. First he spoke to the two Ajaxes, men who needed no bidding. "Ajaxes," said he, "may it now please you to show yourselves the men you have always been, or even better. Sarpedon is fallen, he who was first to overleap the wall of the Achaeans. Let us take the body and outrage it. Let us strip the armour from his shoulders and kill his comrades, if they try to rescue his body." He spoke to men who of themselves were full eager. Both sides, therefore, Trojans and Lycians on the one hand, and the Myrmidons and Achaeans on the other, strengthened their battalions, and fought desperately about the body of Sarpedon, shouting fiercely the while. Mighty was the din of their armour as they came together, and Jove shed a thick darkness over the fight to increase of the battle over the body of his son. At first the Trojans made some headway against the Achaeans, for one of the best men among the Myrmidons was killed, Epeigeus, son of noble Achilles, who had erewhile been king in the good city of Budium. But presently, having killed a valiant kinsman of his own, he took refuge with Peleus and Thetis, who sent him to Iliad, the land of noble steeds, to fight the Trojans under Achilles. Hector now struck him on the head with a stone just as he had caught hold of the body, and his brains inside his helmet were all battered in, so that he fell face foremost upon the body of Sarpedon, and there died. Patroclus was enraged by the death of his comrade, and sped through the front ranks as swiftly as a hawk that swoops down on a flock of daws or starlings. Even so swiftly, O noble knight Patroclus, did you make straight for the Lycians and Trojans to avenge your comrade. Forthwith he struck Sthenelus, the son of Ithaemenes, on the neck with a stone, and broke the tendons that join it to the head and spine. On this Hector and the front rank of his men gave ground, as far as a man can throw a javelin when competing for some prize, or even in battle. So far did the Trojans now retreat before the Achaeans. Glaucus, captain of the Lycians, was the first to rally them, by killing Bathycles, son of Chalcon, who lived in Hellas, and was the richest man among the Myrmidons. Glaucus turned round suddenly, just as Bathycles, who was pursuing him, was about to lay hold of him, and drove his spear right into the middle of his chest, whereon he fell heavily to the ground, and the fall of so good a man filled the Achaeans with dismay, while the Trojans were exultant, and came up in a body round the corpse. Nevertheless, the Achaeans, mindful of their prowess, bore straight down upon them. Meriones then killed a helmed warrior of the Trojans, Laogonus, son of Onotor, who was priest of Jove of Mount Ida, and was honoured by the people as though he were a god. Meriones struck him under the jaw and ear, so that life went out of him, and the darkness of death laid hold upon him. Aeneas then aimed a spear at Meriones, hoping to hit him under the shield as he was advancing, but Meriones saw it coming, and stooped forward to avoid it, whereon the spear flew past him, and the point stuck in the ground, while the butt end went on quivering till Mars robbed it of its force. The spear, therefore, sped from Aeneas's hand in vain, and fell quivering to the ground. Aeneas was angry and said, Meriones, you are a good dancer, but if I had hit you, my spear would soon have made an end of you. And Meriones answered, Aeneas, for all your bravery, you will not be able to make an end of everyone who comes against you. You are only a mortal like myself, and if I were to hit you in the middle of your shield with my spear, however strong and self-confident you may be, I should soon vanquish you, and you would yield your life to Hades of the noble steeds. On this the son of Menœtius rebuked him, and said, Meriones, hero though you be, you should not speak thus. Taunting speeches, my good friend, will not make the Trojans draw away from the dead body. Some of them must go underground first. Blows for battle, and words for counsel. Fight, therefore, and say nothing. He led the way as he spoke, and the hero went forward with him, as the sound of woodcutters in some forest glade upon the mountains, and the thud of their axes is heard afar, even such a din now rose from earth, clash of bronze armour, and of good ox-hide shields, as men smote each other with their swords, and spears pointed at both ends. A man had need of good eyesight now to know Sarpedon, so covered was he from head to foot with spears and blood and dust. Men swarmed about the body as flies that buzz round the full milk pails in spring when they are brimming with milk. Even so did they gather round Sarpedon, nor did Jove turn his keen eyes away for one moment from the fight, but kept looking at it all the time, for he was settling how best to kill Patroclus, and considering whether Hector should be allowed to end him now in the fight round the body of Sarpedon, and strip him of his armour, or whether he should let him give yet further trouble to the Trojans. In the end, he deemed it best that the brave squire of Achilles, son of Peleus, should drive Hector and the Trojans back towards the city and take the lives of many. First, therefore, he made Hector turn faint-hearted, whereon he mounted his chariot and fled, bidding the other Trojans fly also, for he saw that the scales of Jove had turned against him. Neither would the brave Lycians stand firm. They were dismayed when they saw their king lying struck to the heart amid a heap of corpses. For when the son of Saturn made the fight wax hot, many had fallen above him. The Achaeans therefore stripped the gleaming armour from his shoulders, and the brave son of Menoetius gave it to his men to take to the ships. Then Jove, lord of the storm cloud, said to Apollo, "Dear Phoebus, go, I pray you, and take Sarpedon out of range of the weapons, cleanse the black blood from off him, and then bear him a long way off, where you may wash him in the river, anoint him with ambrosia, and clothe him in immortal raiment. This done, commit him to the arms of the two fleet messengers, Death and Sleep, who will carry him straightway to the rich land of Lycia, where his brothers and kinsmen will enter him, and will raise both mound and pillar to his memory, in due honour to the dead." Thus he spoke. Apollo obeyed his father's saying, and came down from the heights of Ida into the thick of the fight. Forthwith he took Sarpedon out of range of the weapons, and then bore him a long way off, where he washed him in the river, anointed him with ambrosia, and clothed him in immortal raiment. This done, he committed him to the arms of the two fleet messengers, Death and Sleep, who presently set him down in the rich land of Lycia. Meanwhile Patroclus, with many a shout to his horses, and to Automedon, pursued the Trojans and Lycians in the pride and foolishness of his heart. Had he but obeyed the bidding of the son of Peleus, he would have escaped death and have been scatheless. But the counsels of Jove pass man's understanding. He will put even a brave man to flight, and snatch victory from his grasp, or again he will set him on to fight, as he now did when he put a high spirit into the heart of Patroclus, who then first and who last was slain by you, O Patroclus, when the gods had now called you to meet your doom. First Adrestus, Autonus, Echeclus, Perimus the son of Megas, Epistor and Melanippus. After these he killed Elasus, Mulius, and Pilates. These he slew, but the rest saved themselves by flight. The sons of the Achaeans would now have taken Troy by the hands of Patroclus, for his spear flew in all directions, had not Phoebus Apollo taken his stand upon the wall to defeat his purpose and to aid the Trojans. Thrice did Patroclus charge at an angle of the high wall, and thrice did Apollo beat him back, striking his shield with his own immortal hands. When Patroclus was coming on like a god for yet a fourth time, Apollo shouted to him with an awful voice, and said, "Draw back, noble Patroclus. It is not your lot to sack the city of the Trojan chieftains, nor yet will it be that of Achilles, who is a far better man than you are." On hearing this, Patroclus withdrew to some distance, and avoided the anger of Apollo. Meanwhile, Hector was waiting with his horses inside the Scaean gates, in doubt whether to drive out again and go on fighting, or to call the army inside the gates. As he was thus doubting, Phoebus, Apollo drew near him in the likeness of a young and lusty warrior, Achilles, who was Hector's uncle, being own brother to Hecuba, and son of Demas, who lived in Phrygia by the waters of the river Sangaris. In his likeness Jove's son Apollo now spoke to Hector, saying, Hector, why have you left off fighting? It is ill done of you. If I were as much better a man than you, as I am worse, you should soon rue your slackness. Drive straight towards Patroclus, if so be that Apollo may grant you a triumph over him, and you may rule him. With this the god went back into the hurly-burly, and Hector bade Cebriones drive again into the fight. Apollo passed in among them, and struck panic into the Argives, while he gave triumph to Hector and the Trojans. Hector let the other Danaans alone, and killed no man, but drove straight at Patroclus. Patroclus then sprang from his chariot to the ground, with a spear in his left hand, and in his right a jagged stone as large as his hand could hold. He stood still and threw it, nor did it go far without hitting someone. The cast was not in vain, for the stone struck Cebriones, Hector's charioteer, a bastard son of Priam, as he held the reins in his hands. The stone hit him on the forehead and drove his brows into his head, for the bone was smashed, and his eyes fell to the ground at his feet. He dropped dead from his chariot, as though he were diving, and there was no more life left in him. Over him did you then vaunt, O knight Patroclus, saying, Bless my heart, how active he is, and how well he dives. If we had been at sea, this fellow would have dived from the ship's side, and brought up as many oysters as the whole crew could stomach, even in rough water, for he has dived beautifully off his chariot onto the ground. It seems then that there are divers also among the Trojans. As he spoke, he flung himself on Cebriones with the spring, as it were, of a lion that while attacking a stockyard is himself struck in the chest, and his courage is his own bane. Even so furiously, O Patroclus, did you then spring upon Cebriones. Hector sprang also from his chariot to the ground. The pair then fought over the body of Cebriones, as two lions fight fiercely on some high mountain over the body of a stag that they have killed. Even so did these two mighty warriors, Patroclus, son of Menœtius, and brave Hector, hack and hew at one another over the corpse of Cebriones. Hector would not let him go when he had once got him by the head, while Patroclus kept fast hold of his feet. And a fierce fight raged between the other Danaans and Trojans, as the east and south wind buffet one another when they beat upon some dense forest on the mountains. There is beech and ash and spreading cornel. The two of the trees roar as they beat on one another, and one can hear the boughs cracking and breaking. Even so did the Trojans and Achaeans spring upon one another and lay about each other, and neither side would give way. Many a pointed spear fell to ground, and many a winged arrow sped from its bowstring about the body of Cebriones. Many a great stone, moreover, beat on many a shield as they fought around his body. But there he lay in the whirling clouds of dust, all huge and hugely heedless of his driving now. So long as the sun was still high in mid-heaven, the weapons of either side were alike deadly, and the people fell. But when he went down towards the time when men loose their oxen, the Achaeans proved to be beyond all forecast stronger, so that they drew Cebriones out of range of the darts and tumult of the Trojans, and stripped the armour from his shoulders. Then Patroclus sprang like Mars with fierce intent, and a terrific shout upon the Trojans, and thrice did he kill 9 men, but as he was coming on like a god for a time. Then, O Patroclus, was the hour of your end approaching, for Phoebus fought you in fell earnest. Patroclus did not see him as he moved about in the crush, for he was enshrouded in thick darkness, and the god struck him from behind on his back, and his horse's feet, where its horsehair plumes were all begrimed with dust and blood. Never indeed had that helmet fared so before, for it had served to protect the head and comely forehead of the godlike hero Achilles. Now, however, Zeus delivered it over to be worn by Hector. Nevertheless, the end of Hector also was near. The bronze-shod spear, so great and so strong, was broken in the hand of Patroclus, while his shield that covered him from head to foot fell to the ground, as did also the band that held it, and Apollo undid the fastenings of his corslet. On this his mind became clouded, his limbs failed him, and he stood as one dazed, whereon Euphorbus, son of Pantas, a Dardanian, the best spearman of his time, as also the finest horseman and fleetest runner, came behind him and struck him in the back with a spear, midway between the shoulders. This man, as soon as ever he had come up with his chariot, had dismounted 20 men, so proficient was he in all the arts of war. He it was, O knight Patroclus, that first drove a weapon into you, but he did not quite overpower you. Euphorbus then ran back into the crowd, after drawing his ashen spear out of the wound. He would not stand firm and wait for Patroclus, unarmed though he now was, to attack him. But Patroclus, unnerved alike by the blow the god had given him and by the spear wound, drew back under cover of his men in fear for his life. Hector, on this, seeing him to be wounded and giving ground, forced his way through the ranks, and when close up with him, struck him in the lower part of the belly with a spear, driving the bronze point right through it, so that he fell heavily to the ground, to the great of the Achaeans, as when a lion has fought some fierce wild boar and worsted him. The two fight furiously upon the mountains, over some little fountain at which they would both drink, and the lion has beaten the boar till he can hardly breathe. Even so did Hector, son of Priam, take the life of the brave son of Menetius, who had killed so many, striking him from close at hand, and vaunting over him the while. Patroclus, said he, you deem that you should sack our city, rob our Trojan women of their freedom, and carry them off in your ships to your own country. Fool, Hector and his fleet horses were ever straining their utmost to defend them. I am foremost of all the Trojan warriors to stave the day of bondage from off them. As for you, vultures shall devour you here. Poor wretch, Achilles with all his bravery availed you nothing, and yet I win when you left him. He charged you straightly, saying, Come not back to the ships, knight Patroclus, till you have rent the blood-stained shirt of murderous Hector about his body. Thus, I ween did he charge you, and your fool's heart answered him yea within you. Then, as the life ebbed out of you, you answered, O knight Patroclus, Hector, vaunt as you will, for Jove, the son of Saturn and Apollo, have vouchsafed you victory. It is they who have vanquished me so easily, and they who have stripped the armour from my shoulders. Had 20 such men as you attacked me, all of them would have fallen before my spear. Fate and the son of Leto have overpowered me, and among mortal men Euphorbus, you are yourself third only in the killing of me. I say further, and lay my saying to your heart, you too shall live but for a little season. Death and the day of your doom are close upon you, and they will lay you low by the hand of Achilles, son of Aeacus. When he had thus spoken, his eyes were closed in death, his soul left his body, and flitted down to the house of Hades, mourning its sad fate, and bidding farewell to the youth and vigour of his manhood. Dead though he was, Hector still spoke to him, saying, Patroclus, why should you thus foretell my doom? Who knows but Achilles, son of lovely Thetis, may be smitten by my spear, and die before me? As he spoke, He drew the bronze spear from the wound, planting his foot upon the body, which he thrust off and let lie on its back. He then went spear in hand after Automedon, squire of the fleet descendant of Aeacus, for he longed to lay him low, but the immortal steeds which the gods had given as a rich gift to Peleus bore him swiftly from the field.